Hello everybody! Today I'm coming to you with a very special supercut, or director's cut, of the Mandela Catalogue. Or more specifically, my series regarding the Mandela Catalogue. Given that Halloween is right around the corner, I wanted you guys to have something horror related for the Halloween season. And as many of you probably know, the Mandela Catalogue is a series that is very close to my heart, and one of the first series that blew up on this channel. Not counting, the conspiracy iceberg. However, to be completely honest with you, looking back on some of my Mandela Catalogue videos, there's a lot I could have changed. There were times I should have added more visual elements, there were theories I had back then that don't make any sense now. So for your all's viewing pleasure, and also to hold you over while I'm still working on the Ted Kaczynski video, I've decided to amass my 3 previous videos about the Mandela Catalogue and put them together for you all now. So not only will this video have things like the intros, outros, and ads removed, but I'll also be removing information that doesn't make any sense and adding more visual elements to get the full breadth of the series across. Now to clarify, this is not my Halloween special. I am working on that in tandem with the Ted Kaczynski video, although I can promise you now that that video will not be out for Halloween. So in true Wendigoon fashion, my holiday video will not be out by the holiday. But hopefully this at least tides you over for now and brings a highlight to a series that I think is something to talk about. And the last thing I want to mention while this video is up, so originally, the merch drop, which includes the Wendigoon Hawaiian shirt with included pocket square and logo, as well as the Wendigoon Conspiracy Iceberg hoodie, were originally supposed to go out of sale today. However, you guys have been so gracious with the support that you've shown, the company has agreed to let it go for a few days longer. So this is your final chance. The Wendigoon Hawaiian shirt, crazy eyes, icebergs, and all, as well as the glow-in-the-dark Conspiracy Iceberg hoodie, are going to be available until Sunday night, and after that, they're gone forever. The links to both of these will be in the description. Get them while you can, which at the point you all are seeing this will be like 2.5 days from now, so clock's ticking. And then after the sale's done, I'll remove this merch plug from the video so the Mandela Catalogue Supercut can remain as is. But this is the last chance to those interested. Go to the link in the description before they're gone for good. So I'll get out of your way and let you all enjoy the supercut, but before we get into it, I just want to say thank you for watching. Caitlin, do not put this in the video. I'm going to go grab a drink. According to Alex, the most cohesive way to understand this story is to start with the second video on the channel titled Think. We open with a symbol from the United States Department of Temporal Phenomena. We can see beneath the wording that it was established in 1981, and the symbol of the department itself is that of a clock. Even the saying tempus fugit under it means time flies in Latin. Now again, we're going to get into theories about what this means and how it all connects together in a bit, but I'm just giving you the pieces of the puzzle right now. We start the video and see that it is an informational guide how to deal with something that they call the unforeseen threat known as an alternate. Now before we get the description of them, it says that if ever encountering an alternate, the best thing to do is to lock your doors, get a gun, run and hide. And in our description of what the creature actually is, it says that some of them can look perfectly identical to specific humans. However, that some of them, as we see that other ones contain wildly inhuman features. It says that the alternate's way of attack is that it performs a method of psychological warfare, and in the diagram we can see that this alternate is speaking redacted text to what appears to be 2 distressed humans. Now what's interesting is that we're given a lot more of the pieces here than you may think after you finish the series. So for now, keep in mind that these alternates do a form of psychological warfare and can appear to look as a specific person. So we then see what the actual think principle itself is. Think is an acronym for what to do if encountering an alternate, which is first step to tell an authority figure, then hinder the alternate's movement, identify the class type, neutralize the alternate, and finally, kill yourself with the message, there's not enough room for the 2 of us. So in order, tell an authority figure, find a way to get away, try to identify the kind that it is if you can, and then if killing it doesn't work, take out yourself. What's interesting is the message at the end that says there's not enough room for the two of us. This implies a couple things. For one, it's the idea that for an alternate to become an alternate, it has to take over the role of the person that it's trying to mimic. And also, it seems that one of these alternates is speaking to us right now. After that, we see a message that we need to know our place in reality. But not only that, we then move on to a message that says know your enemy. We are then shown 3 different classes of these creatures. The first one being that of a doppelganger. This appears to be a perfect copycat of the person that they're trying to mimic. We see something known as detectable. I'll get into what that means in a minute, but the only image that we have of it right now is that of the angel Gabriel, with a very distorted face, and then finally the redacted class type. These things do not look at all like the people they are trying to mimic, and this is an example of that impossible anatomy that was mentioned earlier. We see 3 examples of what this redacted class type looks like before we get the final shot of the video, which is one of them standing in someone's bedroom corner. So we now know that there's 3 different types of these creatures that are attacking everyone. The doppelganger and the redacted are the ones we'll look at right now. The detectable is its own thing I'll talk about in a minute. So we see that some of them are these impossibly shaped creatures that can be in someone's house, as well as another kind that is a perfect copy of an individual. Keep all these pieces together right now. There's 2 different kinds, at least 2 different main kinds. They mimic and they do acts of psychological warfare. With that in mind, let's move on to the next episode. After this, we'll move on to the 3rd video on the channel, which Alex recommended to me as being the 2nd one in the watch order, and that is Mandela Catalogue Volume 1. The beginning of this is exactly like the beginning of the Think video. However, it seems like early into it, whoever is watching through the VCR player ejects the video and starts up a new one. This doesn't necessarily relate to the story of it altogether, but at least not yet it doesn't. But it seems that someone is watching all of these videos in the order that we're seeing them. So maybe whoever's watching this tape is trying to find out more information about what these alternates do. So after the section of the Think video is over, we then see a picture of 2 different guys who are initially identified as Victim 1 and Victim 2, before their names change to Mark Heathcliff and Caesar Torres. We hear a phone conversation between the 2 where Caesar says that he's taking his mom to the hospital. What happens is Caesar says that he heard his mom scream, she took a bad fall, so now he's driving her to the hospital and needs Mark to turn on the cameras in the house. Now this is weird, right? If your mom collapsed and you were driving her to the hospital, your first concern wouldn't be to call your friend to have him come over and turn on a bunch of security cameras. This implies that whatever's going on with these alternates, maybe people don't know the specifics of how it works, but they know that something's going on and the news is telling them that something's going on. The conversation continues until Caesar says the phrase, "Try to get a good view of the back hallway," before the video immediately distorts and Caesar's face morphs into this. In my opinion, watching it in this order, this is the first real scare of the series, but don't worry, it'll get worse. So we then follow a recording from Mark's dash cam as he drives over to Caesar's house. We then flip through all the cameras that are turned on within Caesar's house before we see the message come on the screen that there was motion detected at 3 a.m. Also, this is kind of a side note from the story itself, but Alex has done an excellent job at setting up tension to this point, and I didn't say this earlier enough, let me say this now. If this sounds even remotely interesting to you, it's the link right after the ad in the description. Go to it, watch it. I do not want to spoil the horror of the series for you by describing it before you get to experience it firsthand, so go do that. But Alex really is great at setting up tension because as these cameras were flipping, I was on the edge of my seat. No clue what was going to happen, but just ready for anything. After that, we then see another message come across the screen at 5:30 a.m. that says there was a noise detected. We then hear a woman scream the phrase, "Who are you? Get away from me." And then we have another jump cut to the faces of Mark and Caesar as they're twisted and pulled into this, and then just 2 standalone eyes in the darkness. Now, because there's only been one woman mentioned in the series so far, that being Caesar's mother, I'm going to imagine this is her. Not only that, but Caesar's mention to Mark to turn on the cameras in the back hallway implies that that's either where he found her or where he heard the scream from. So I think what we're hearing is the last interaction that she had before she was attacked by whatever this thing is. And then at the final shot of the house, we see that the door is wide open. We then get the message, "It followed me home, Caesar," before we cut to a shot of a wooden door in someone's bedroom with this sound playing of someone trying to get in.
Let me in, Mark. I have a gift for you. I have a present. I have a surprise. I will not hurt.
Now, considering the sentence was, "It followed me home, Caesar," and then from evidence we'll see in a second, this is Mark who has just left Caesar's house. And now whatever followed Mark home from Caesar's house is outside of his bedroom door, trying to convince him to come out. We then get this message, again from Mark, that says, "I do not want to see what is on the other side, but it has been days and nobody has come to help me." We then hear audio of Mark hearing laughing coming from within his house, before he screams and then fires a gun. We then see the phrase on the screen, "Uh-oh, bad decision, Mark," before we hear footsteps running to the camera and this face appears on screen. We then see this shot of Mark's partially censored body lying on the bed as a dial tone plays, with the text saying, "Nobody came for me." Alright, so some stuff to take away from this clip is after Mark went to Caesar's house to turn on the cameras, it seems, as he said, that something followed him home. And then after days of it tormenting him over and over, Mark shot himself because, as he said, "No one came for me." So to raise a couple hypothetical questions that I'm going to answer in a second. For one, how on earth did Caesar survive if whatever this thing is attacked his mom, and then whenever Mark comes, it immediately follows him home? And also, why, if he attempted to call the police and was in there for days, did no one come to help him? Well, we'll get an answer to that second one right now. In the next tape on this episode, we are now viewing the Mandela County Police training video, with the warning message that we should definitely not watch this at any case if we ourselves are not part of the police force. We also see that this is specifically for 911 call operators. A creepy voice gives us the basic rundown, where it explains to us what to do in the case of police, fire, and medical emergencies, which all of them are just called the police, fire, or medical departments. So yeah. Before we get a secret fourth option that can occur, and that is an encounter, to which it specifically says, and remember, this is for anyone who is a call operator in Mandela County, do not help a caller reporting an alternate encounter. So, for one, that explains why no one came to help Mark, because they're specifically told that they can't help them. But why? It then follows up and says no matter how frantic their screams are, and that they should lie to the caller and say that help is on the way. It then goes on to say, do not speak too much, you might accidentally reveal your fear, before the line, "nothing is worth the risk," is repeated over and over. So initially you may watch this part where it says that the police shouldn't help anyone who's dealing with an alternate and think that they're in on it. However, that last sentence makes me think otherwise. The part where it says, do not talk too much, you might accidentally reveal your fear. If the police were for some reason in on this, why would they be afraid to reveal their fear to this person who's about to be a victim of an alternate attack? Or alternatively, what if they don't want the alternate to know what they fear? Hence the phrase that follows afterwards, nothing is worth the risk. We then move on to the final tape within this video, which is titled Toddler Stress Assessment, where the idea is you are supposed to record your child's response to various media. It starts out normally, as most of these horrific tapes do, but then we see the message, "Daddy didn't tuck me in," and "there is a man in the closet." After this, we then see a book that a kid has wrote, and that kid's name is Mark, and he wrote it when he was only 4 years old. The book is titled The Scary Night, and it goes as such. "Daddy didn't check under my bed last night, so I went to Mommy's room. I was scared. There was scary knocking at the door. And the scariest part is walking by the dark room by the stairs." We then see a diagram of this dark room by the stairs that Mark's referring to. "Almost at Mommy's room, then I saw the man in the corner. And then I fell asleep," the end. With this being the diagram of the man in the corner. And then finally, in the second section of this video, It then says we're supposed to record our child's reaction to visual stimuli, and after some normal images of cats and balloons and white people and all that stuff, we then see an image of this dark room by the staircase that Mark was referring to, and then finally we see this, with the message next to it indicating that this is an intruder. And that's the end of Mandela Catalogue Volume 1. Alright, so that final module connects a lot of the ideas of what we've got so far. So whatever this intruder was, the man in the closet that Mark saw as a child, it behaves very differently from the mimics or the alternates that we've seen up until this point. See, according to Mark, this thing was an element of his childhood. It wasn't just a one-time occurrence, it was the man in the dark room. And at the end of the video, he's specifically referred to as an intruder. This is very similar to the alternates that we saw at the end of the first video, the Think video that was standing in the corner. Once again, a man in a corner. However, the behavior was totally different, and that's something I'll address in a bit. Now, while I may be jumping the gun a little bit, and this may get more into the theory side I'm going to talk about at the end, I want to mention this right now while it's fresh on your mind. The thing I mentioned earlier, the other hypothetical question of how wasn't Caesar killed by whatever this thing is? Well, if you'll remember how doppelgangers work, they are a perfect copy of the person that they want to mimic. And at the beginning of the video, we see Mark and Caesar both labeled as victims. However, we don't see anything happen to Caesar within this video. So what if Caesar was already a doppelganger at the time he called Mark? Because think about it, if one of these things was in Caesar's house and it attacked his mother and potentially killed her, then how was Caesar able to just walk back there, put her in her car, and drive to the hospital? It would also explain why he was so eager to get Mark to come over to his house, and especially for him to go into the back hallway. Not only that, but whenever we hear the scream of the mother at that portion in the video and their faces distort, it's Caesar's face who distorts into the two-eyed figure. This would imply that the creature that attacked her was the mimic of her own son, Caesar. So I think that Caesar was already dead and his doppelganger lured Mark over to the house so that he could be killed as well, or in this case, kill himself. Now, we're going to get more into why they're doing this and particularly how they're doing this in a minute, but now we need to go to what is, in my opinion, the most terrifying episode of the entire series, and it's the first episode on the channel, Overthrown. Also, we're going to get sacrilegious here. If you have a problem with that, I'm sorry. Overthrown is the first video on the channel and the third in the recommended watch order. It opens up with what appears to be a children's television special of the biblical Christmas story. It starts out normally with Gabriel telling the shepherds that Jesus has been born in the city in Bethlehem before the screen distorts, and then nothing is normal or okay after this. We hear a broken voice describing the cities and Bethlehem in which Jesus was born before it talks about the moment in which the angel came to Mary to tell her that he was going to be the mother of Christ. However, this time it says that the angel's name is redacted. Now, it's easier if I talk you through this as we go through this episode, because it'll make more sense at the end of it. So it seems that what's happened is Gabriel, who we saw in the first scene, whenever that screen was distorted, they were replaced, and now we have this new angel who, again, the name is redacted. Whenever the angel comes down to Mary, we get this horrific glitch that comes up on screen. I also want to mention that I thought you all were hyping Mandela Catalogue up a little bit too much, and remember, this is the first episode on the channel. So, I'm like, all right, what is this? Another ARG? I've seen 8 million of these. I'm tough. So I turn it on at night by myself, and it's that. And I saw the face and heard the glitch noise and all that, and was mortified, and I hate all of you. Anyway, so after we see this broken face, a black square covers it up. After Mary speaks to this redacted angel, we then hear the angel say something that's completely unintelligible. Now, I know that there's hidden messages within the captions of this video, however, I want to save that for the end analysis. We then see Joseph sleeping in his bed as this redacted angel comes to the window and says that he will know the shepherd's fear and that he will trick the shepherds before repeating "Wake up, Joseph" over and over. We then get an alternate scene of the opening, wherever Gabriel came to the angels, only this time it's our new redacted or fake angel. Remember, the way that these doppelgangers work is they replace someone and take on their identity. So we now have this figure, which is the body of Gabriel with another blacked out box over the head, before he says to the shepherds, "I know what makes you human, I know what you love and what you dread," before his face glitches and this happens. Now, it may just be the fact that I'm a Christian and have been raised in church all my life and stuff like that, and the fact that little uncanny stuff gets me, but the combination between the distorted music and the face and everything put together absolutely destroyed me for a while. Like I said, that whenever I've been going to sleep, I keep seeing this face over and over. It's this face. And what's funny is a couple of you are probably looking at like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And you know what? I'm glad that you're tough, and I'm glad you're that cool, and I'm glad that you're going to be able to sleep tonight, because I won't. We then see a text in red across the sky that says, "Can't you see I deceive them, such weak minds?" Before the text color shifts to white, and we see this message: "I am bound to chains on my ankles that grow heavier with every step. The infinite amount of sand will be my tomb, and my foolishness will be my legacy. If there is a God, please help me." Now, there's certainly a lot to break down there, and I could do that now, or I could make you wait for the end of it, and I think I'm going to make you wait for the end of it. The reason being, and I promise, it's going to make a lot more sense when I talk about all of this at once. So for now, let's move on to the next one, Intruder Alert. Intruder Alert is the fourth video and the fourth one in this watch order. It opens up with the charming message with this guy's face that says, "I am inside your home." Lovely. We then switch to another message from Mandela County, from the Mandela County Child Endangerment Awareness Association. What they're doing is showing an educational video to teach parents how to properly keep an eye on their children. We then see a television set that has normal things on it initially, but then right before a cut we have a fade in of the face that we saw at the beginning of the video. We then see that we are to be careful about the TV before the message is quickly typed in that they exist on different spectrums. So we obviously see that whatever these creatures are, and the fact that the name of this episode is titled Intruder Alert and the opening face said, "I am inside your home," we can assume that whatever this face is, it's part of this mimic or alternate thing that's going on in Mandela County. And for whatever reason, they are now capable of using television sets. We then see the message that if your child is screaming, you should wait for your child to stop making noise, which is definitely some parent of the year advice, if any. Before it shows a diagram of a mother walking into the room to see her child, that the cradle is empty, and then that face again on the TV. We then get the slow diagram as it shows the woman herself with the message, "distraught at the sight of her missing infant." So it seems that what happened, this face or this alternate came through the TV, by some means took the child, and as the message said, distraught at the sight of her missing infant, the woman. This is the second time in the series we've seen someone commit suicide over what these alternates do. We then flip over to the Mandela County Emergency Alert System. That says across 4 counties there has been 3,426 missing children. I don't even know how this is just a Mandela County problem anymore. Like, if that many kids went missing, wouldn't like the military or Batman or someone get involved? We get the important details about the TV immediately after, as the message then says to keep kids away from the TV and anything that can produce frightening imagery. We then cut over to what is a Mandela County police investigation of a suicide. It says after they heard the child crying and a crack, they could not find their child, to which the mother then committed suicide. We can only assume that this is the diagram we saw a moment ago. The investigator goes, takes this one image of the house, and has an incredibly dreadful feeling before leaving. One of the officers decided to go inside and set up a camera outside of the room in which the suicide occurred. For some reason, none of the police want to go within the room itself. This is the order of images that we see from the camera that the officer set up. Initially it's nothing, before the entire room is shadowed, followed by a shadow with eyes eerily similar to that of Caesar's in the previous video. We see a face which is identical to the face we have seen in the television up until this point, before we get this horrific shot of a redacted black square on the staircase with the message, "Victim's corpse is seen being tampered with by invisible source." My favorite part about this, and this made me crack up watching it initially, for all of the pictures, it has in the bottom right the current threat level, like threat level none, threat level minimal, whatever. And for here, whenever it says that an invisible force is messing with the corpse, it says threat level evident. Like, yeah, you don't say. We then get a message from the police saying that the suspect is completely unidentifiable. However, the police have ruled out the chance of this being an alternate. Now, this is interesting for a couple reasons. For one, alternate's the only thing that we've really known about up until this point, but also the fact that the police are aware enough about them that they can do things like rule them out in this supernatural case. Think about it this way. These things want to get to the point in which they can completely take on the physical form of a person. If I'm correct about Caesar being one of the alternates, then that's his final stage, and his next point wasn't to kill Mark, it was to have another one follow him home. So the final end goal that these things want to be at is to take over a human life. But we see some of them don't operate that way. Like, for example, the one that followed Mark home, and now the one that's here in this house. Instead, both of them operated through fear. Remember that message whenever it was explaining to police call operators why they're never supposed to send anyone to help someone who's had an alternate encounter? Do you remember the message that said do not talk too much because they may find out what you're afraid of? I think what happens is these redacteds, which from here on out I'm going to refer to as intruders. I believe that these intruders, as it's mentioned, exist on different spectrums and cannot directly interact with people. So the way that they operate is they figure out what someone fears. This is also something that I'm going to consider for now alternate Jesus mentioned in Overthrone when he said that he will know what the shepherds fear. So these creatures, this whole cluster, all different three types that we've seen so far that have been referred to as alternates, all use fear as a means of getting to people. And the reason that they do that is to make people commit suicide. See what happened with Mark. This creature followed him home and tormented him for days on end until Mark couldn't take it anymore. And then whenever he does take the shot, the message that comes on screen says, "Uh-oh, bad decision, Mark," before we see that creature run up to the camera and supposedly put his face in it. As if this creature has been waiting on the edge of his seat for the opportunity for Mark to kill himself. And then what do we see here in this tape? We see that whatever this face is, whatever this thing on another spectrum is, the intruder has come through the television and stole this mother's baby, and as it says, at the sight of her missing infant, himself. But not only that, a few hours later, while the police are there investigating, they see an invisible force move and alter the corpse before it disappears. And the police specifically ruled out the chance of this being an alternate. The way I believe it works is whatever these creatures are, they start out as intruders. And the way that they work is they are on different spectrums and therefore cannot directly interact with people, but what they can get them to do is kill themselves. And then from there, they can possess the corpse that is now left behind, becoming an alternate. So the story that would mean thus far is that the first victim of all of this had to be Caesar. He committed suicide. One of the intruders took over his body and became an alternate, to which now he's in his physical form and could do something like just murder his mother, or Caesar's mother. So now this alternate's goal isn't to just murder Mark, but to have him be a vessel for another intruder. To which the intruder carries out that whole thing and we can imagine takes over Mark's body. That would also explain why the police were able to rule out an alternate, because this isn't an alternate's MO. So while the police seem to be privy on this, between things like they know what alternates are and they know to not let the alternate at the end of a phone of someone having an encounter figure out what the call operator fears, but they're not perfect because they're not exactly sure how the intruders work yet. To drive my point home, let's get on to the final video of the series up until this moment, metaphysical awareness disorder. You see in this educational video that metaphysical awareness disorder, also referred to as MAD, has had a 95% increase in recent cases. In the demonstration of how it works, we see something fade into existence, say something unintelligible to a person, and then leaving. It says that MAD is exposure to verbal information that is not desired to be known, and that in 97% of cases, it results in the person's suicide. This is exactly what I was referring to. Whatever these creatures are, they can fade into existence, and they have this forbidden knowledge, or as it says here, information that is not desired to be known, and they are so effective at this that 97% of people exposed to it commit. So then it talks about ways to avoid MAD, and it says some interesting stuff. It first says to avoid religious beliefs and philosophical practices. We then get the horrifying message that if you're falling asleep and you think its eyes are in your face, do not open your eyes, it's watching. Which is the horrifying idea that if one of these intruders are in your house and you're falling asleep, it could be right in front of your face staring at you. Alright, so we've gone through it. Pat yourself on the back. You were very brave and I'm proud of you. And while at this point I'm pretty confident in my theory that this is how alternates behave and the way that they act, we still don't know what they are. At least not yet, you don't. If you'll remember, in the Overthrone video, there was a couple of hidden messages that I didn't get to yet, but let's get to them now. There are two hidden messages in Overthrone. The first, as mentioned earlier, is whenever the redacted or false angel speaks to Mary. If you have your captions turned on, you can see there is a message there in binary. If you translate that binary, which thank you to Kiko, who's currently the top comment on that video for doing the translation, which if you translate that binary, you get the message, I am the one true savior. I must reverse the delusion. Joseph is next. For one, the Joseph is next part lines up because the next thing that we see is this same fake angel outside of Joseph's window talking to him. However, that line, I am the one true savior, is what's interesting, because at the end of the video we see something that looks like Jesus until the face morphs, but here we see that whatever that is wanting to take his place. However, it's the second hidden message that for me really does it. There is a brief cut before we see text on the screen where we just hear heavy breathing as if someone's distressed or scared. And then if you have your subtitles turned on, you will see this message. How frozen I became and powerless then. Ask it not, reader, for I write it not, because all language would be insufficient. I did not die and I alive remain not. Think for thyself now. Hast thou aught to wit what I became, being of both deprived? What I just read to you is from the 35th canto of Dante's Inferno, which Dante's Inferno is a story of a character Dante and his journey through hell. What I just read is the passage that Dante says whenever he comes face to face with the devil. So think about how this is framed. We have this creature that is wanting to replace Jesus. He is essentially rewriting history for what we see, and then after we finally see him, we get the passage from Dante's Inferno whenever the man views Satan himself. I believe that what we're seeing, and I believe the entire story of the Mandela Catalogue, is that Lucifer overthrew Jesus whenever Jesus came to earth, and now history is played out not at the rule of Christ, but at the rule of demons. See, all of the lines that we've seen so far in Overthrown is of this fake angel, or Lucifer as I'm going to call him from now on, saying that he can be the one true savior, that he just has to deceive everyone, and his mentions that he will make them know fear. So now, looking at the text in red, and let's assume that's Lucifer at the end of Overthrown, it says, can't you see, I deceive them, such weak minds, referring to the fact that Lucifer has taken the place of God in these people's eyes. So then because of that, I believe the text in white that follows is the now overthrown Jesus, as the title implies. I'm getting like goosebumps talking about this right now, because as you can imagine, this is a little touchy for me, but the fact that I'm so freaked out about it is why I think the series is so good, because it genuinely is getting to me. I think this final text at the end of the video, where it talks about being bound and being stuck in infinite sand, before the lines, "If there is a God, please help me," is the now human Jesus cursed to forever walk the earth because Lucifer kicked him out of his role in eternity. And also, if you think that I'm introducing religious ideas into this story, the first video on the channel is of the nativity story and the birth of Jesus. So I didn't do it, he did it first. So what does that mean for all these alternates and intruders that we've seen? I believe that these are demons priming their takeover of Earth. Think about it this way, these demons, as it says, exist on different planes. They're not allowed to cross the barrier over into our world. However, if they have forbidden knowledge and if they can convince someone to, they can then possess their corpse in a quite more literal possession than what we've talked about up until now. And then from there, they can not only manipulate humanity, but they can get more people to be the host for these other demons. So why now, right? If all the way back at like year 0, Lucifer was able to take over the role of God to people on Earth, then why wait so long? Well, once again, as mentioned earlier, these intruders find a way to make someone so afraid that they kill themselves, which would be a very hard and slow process if done on an individual basis for hundreds and hundreds of years. However, with the new invention of television, it's really easy to make a mass amount of people afraid all at once. Remember how there was a message during the child safety time where it said that do not let your children around a television or anything else that can cause frightening imagery? Well, while these things are still in a different dimension and can't directly harm you, they're putting out messages through television, they're whispering to people, they're talking to people, and all of that. And also, remember how in MAD it said one of the ways to avoid developing MAD was to avoid religion itself? Well, that's because 2,000 years ago, instead of Jesus becoming the root version of Christianity, it was instead Lucifer, so everything since then has been tainted. That's also the second mention of religion directly within this series, so again, you can't say I brought devil stuff into this, it was already there. So, as a short TLDR of the entire thing, Lucifer overthrew Jesus some time ago and has now slowly been building up an army of demons on Earth. The demons use fear to subtly manipulate people, and through modern electricity and things like analog horror itself, have a means of making people afraid on a mass scale. I just realized this is like true definitive analog horror because even the creatures within the story are using the analog format in order to make people horrified. But through modern electricity are causing fear on a mass scale and doing things like abducting a lot of children at once in order to make that fear go further. And then finally, whenever someone kills himself and that intruder is allowed to become an alternate by possessing that body, that alternate then opens the gateway for more intruders to inhabit our world. And if you come into contact with an intruder, you're stuck, and it's going to torment you forever until it gets what it wants. This is what we saw happen with Mark. This is why police do not respond to phone calls of intruder encounters. And this is why 97% of people who develop MAD commit suicide. It seems as if the police are the only ones who really know what's going on in this world. At least they have some sort of idea because they understand concepts of things like alternates, even if they don't get how intruders work. But on the wide scale, because it's still reported on things like local news networks, I think that we're seeing the early stages of this demonic takeover. However, my theory isn't perfect, right? And it still doesn't get to all of the questions. Like, for example, if these creatures exist solely in the spiritual plane, how can they do things like abduct children? Then is there a way to permanently stop these things? We see in the early videos that it recommends that you shoot it or try to neutralize it. Does that actually work, and is this something that the police have done? Or is this just to make you feel better about yourself? And then finally, and at the moment, the most pressing question to me, we still don't know what this was. Think about it. All the other alternates are actively trying to get the process going as fast as they can. However, when Mark was just a kid, this thing was just in his closet and in the dark room by the stairs. It just kind of lived there. This is entirely different from any of the behavior that we've seen out of the intruders or the alternates. And there's a lot of questions that we've yet to see, but I guarantee you are on the way.
Shh, it's okay. It's okay. What's wrong, honey? Everything's gonna be okay. There's no need to cry.
I'm sorry. I can't be the man everyone wants me to be.
These things have taken so much away from us, yet you still run to them every chance you get!
Let's go through the new episodes that I didn't cover in part 1, break down the pieces of them, and then begin to paint a picture of what's going on. Beginning with the first episode since my last analysis, Exhibition. Exhibition opens with the sound of an empty phone line and music rising in the background. This music is the same one that was heard during the death in Intruder Alert. We then cut to an animated biblical story, something that is common throughout the series, this being the story of Noah. However, the tape changes when we begin to hear a door knocking when Noah looks up to the sky and we see text over the screen that reads Type 2 Detectable. Type 2 Detectable is the title of the false shepherd in the original Mandela Catalogue videos. So we can assume that Noah is being contacted by the false shepherd. We then see a picture of a young boy and girl at church before we're told that this is evidence in the Mandela County investigation. This investigation is over case 432, the investigation into the death of Mark Heathcliff. Mark Heathcliff, again, is one of the characters from Mandela Catalogue Volume 1. We see evidence that is being collected by Lieutenant Thatcher Davis. If Lieutenant Davis sounds familiar, that's because he was the investigator into the home invasion during Intruder Alert. So he is the one who set up the camera and saw the visuals of a corpse being tampered with. Or at the very least, he was present while that was happening. One of the items from Mark's house is a camcorder. Within the videotape of the camcorder, again this is taken from Mark's point of view before his death, we see Mark video his closet door being opened in the middle of the night. This is intercut with videos of him driving and eventually making it to a church. This seems to be the same church as the photograph shown earlier. And the fact that this is the same church, we can assume that the picture shown earlier was of Mark at a young age. Here, it seems Mark is trying to return to that church in order to find answers given his current ordeal. We continue to see evidence of Mark's paranoia. He takes pictures of an empty window frame, paces throughout his house, sees his door open and close, returns once again to the church, seemingly with no answers. This continues until the television in Mark's room comes on and we hear the audio that again indicates an alternate is present. We then see a figure appear on the TV before the video cuts out, followed by a picture taken on the same date of September 8th, 1992 as the original picture, only this time there is a figure standing outside of Mark's window. Lieutenant Davis remarks that it seems Mark was paranoid for quite some time, and the reasons for this are implied. We see in previous and later entries that the police are well aware of the alternate takeover. As a matter of fact, the video Metaphysical Awareness Disorder tells us that these accounts began occurring in 1982. So the alternates have been at some capacity for the past 10 years, and it just seems like normal routine to the police. More on Mark later, but now we cut back to that video of Noah. In the animation, we begin to hear church bells as something moves closer to Noah. We're then shown that it's the false shepherd, who tells Noah that he is going to bring something on the ark. The false shepherd tells him that whatever goes on the ark with him won't be able to be seen at first, but by the time Noah does see it, it will give him his last message. We understand this to be an alternate. This is similar to Mark and how the alternate tormented Mark until eventually Mark couldn't take it and the alternate then took his place. Instead of just occurring in 1982, from this position we can see that all the way back in the times of Noah, the alternates were operating to some degree. And one managed to survive, again due to the ark. Shortly after the false shepherd disappears, if anyone had any doubts that this story was related to a demonic takeover, the subtitles read 2 Corinthians 11:14, and no wonder, for Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So yeah, the false shepherd is the devil. I could be snarky about how I was right in the first video, but I already did that, so we're just going to move on now. We're then shown the Department of Temporal Phenomena, only this time the title has been changed to say the death of Mark Heathcliff, before quickly glitching and then returning to the normal logo. The Latin on the logo of Tempus Fugit and Implecti Intuitum, I know I pronounced that wrong, translates to time flies and embrace intuition. It says underneath that they were established in 1981 and then revised in 1990. This would be right before the first reported and current alternate outbreak. We don't have a lot of information on the department at this point. I don't know if they're a force of good or evil, but it seems they're in the know on what's going on, potentially before anyone else given the times that they were established. The department has a message that warns of the effects of analog technology and says that financial compensation will not be offered to the families of victims. This shows that the alternates were a very big problem around 1992, to the degree that a US department had to issue a statement saying they would not compensate the families. And to drive that matter home, the next message mentions the television and mirror destruction order. So the alternates are such a problem around 1992 that people are now ordered to destroy their TVs and any mirrors. As we know, alternates can make first contact through televisions and potentially even through mirrors, or at the very least they can torment you through mirrors. So as we see from that message, and more evidence we'll see in a little bit, it's pretty bad. The end credits begin as the song His Truth Is Marching On is heard in the background. Also, this isn't related to the analysis, but I just wanted to say, whenever I did the first Mandela Catalogue video, I was still figuring out the YouTube thing, and I'm still figuring out the YouTube thing, but especially so at that point. And I really loved the Mandela Catalogue then, and I've grown to love it even more now. It's just I think it's a great series, I think it's a unique take, and I really like what Alex is doing with it. So when I made that original video, I was excited that it did so well, and I was excited that Alex got traction and all of that. And then at the end credits of this video exhibition, he said special thanks to, and then my name was at the top. That was a huge deal to me at the time. I'm no expert on YouTube by any means, but I was especially novice then. Again, I was still recording with an iPhone. So to see a series that I respected so much and has so much care and effort put into it, put my name as the first special thanks, was really motivating and really meant a lot. And I just want to say, thank you, Alex. You don't know what that meant to me. Anyway, sappy stuff out of the way, we're moving on into the rest of the series. The next video in the upload schedule is Teaser, but I want to save that one for after Volume 2. So for now, let's jump into the Mandela Catalogue Volume 2. Volume 2 opens with the sound of a phone ringing as we see two FBI wanted posters, one for Adam Murray and the other for Jonah Marshall. It says that they are wanted by the FBI for connections to the Overthrone Paranormal Society, and it seems the FBI wants them enough that they've offered a $100,000 reward. The labels of their names then change to Victim 3 and Victim 4. Alright, so a few things to break down here. Victim 3 and Victim 4 is in reference to Mandela Catalogue Volume 1, where we saw Mark Heathcliff and Cesar Torres. They were identified as Victims 1 and 2. As we know, both of them succumbed to the alternate attacks. And now seeing Adam and Jonah labeled as Victims 3 and 4, we could assume that they'll have the same fate, although we'll get to that in a minute. Another thing of note is that it says the two are related to the Overthrone Paranormal Society. In the earlier Mandela Catalogue videos, Overthrone County is mentioned as being a county that has been affected by alternates and is in close proximity to Mandela County. So these two are from a nearby county and a part of the Paranormal Society, something that apparently is egregious enough that the FBI wants them arrested. The phone's then picked up and it's a call between the two boys and a girl. The girl says that she's been hearing the ghostly apparitions of her dead cat and that she wants the two boys to come over and help guide her cat into the afterlife. After the initial remarks that she's hearing her dead cat, Jonah remarks that it's a cat alternate in a rather sarcastic tone. Alex's writing really begins to shine in Volume 2, and that's not to say I think it's necessarily improved, because I think the original episodes were fantastic. It's just that the material of Volume 2 and the episodes later on give him more of an opportunity to deepen his writing skills. But casual lines like what Jonah said, where he remarks that it's a cat alternate, shows the progression of the world that these characters are set in. We're going to see in just a minute that Adam and Jonah's story takes place in 2009, over 16 years after the events of Volume 1. That means it's been 16 years since the initial alternate takeover and things like the television destruction order. So Adam and Jonah have simply grown up in a world where alternates exist. So whenever Jonah casually remarks that it is a cat alternate, it both goes to the humor of the series and the sadness that this is just the world they're used to. The two are hesitant about babysitting a ghost cat at first, until the girl offers them $500 a night. We're then taken to a GPS view as we see that Adam and Jonah are ready to begin their journey to this girl's home. While sitting in the vehicle, the two remark that the car won't start, and while debating their options, Jonah says that they could maybe steal another one. Before following up, it's not like anyone will call the cops here. This implies a couple things. For one, we know that Jonah and Adam are on the fringes of the law because of their association with the Bythorn Paranormal Society. It seems because of that and this line of stealing another car that the two are operating outside of the law in more ways than one. The note about it's not like anyone will call the cops here is interesting as well. In previous episodes of the Mandela Catalogue, we see that the police are trained to not respond to any call that may have to do with an alternate. My interpretation of that line then is that the people simply do not trust the police because if you need them for an alternate encounter, they will not respond. Again, just clever world building being thrown into the dialogue. We then see a picture of Adam working on the car while wearing a Bythorn Paranormal Society jacket. Now, while it may not be a good idea to wear that jacket if you're wanted by the FBI for your association with the group, it is definitely a fantastic idea for you to wear that jacket through Alex's merch store, which is linked in the description. And no, he didn't ask me to do that or know that I'm doing that. I just think they're pretty cool. We then see from the following photographs that the two make their way into Mandela County. In the following footage, we hear the two having a conversation about alternates and the nature of their existence as they continue their journey, and eventually we get this shot of a cross on the side of the road. Just little touches like that. Fantastic. When the GPS remarks that they're 10 minutes from their destination, Jonah says that that's really helpful and that they didn't have to outlaw these. I doubt his face could appear on it. So this relates back to the TV and mirror destruction order that was mentioned back in 1992, and we see the effects of that still last up until 2009. It seems that the two had never experienced a GPS before, and Jonah's remark of his face not being able to appear on the GPS relates back to the alternates appearing on television. So it seems not only television and mirrors, but anything with a screen has been outlawed, which it almost seems like maybe the bans were working. Because in the conversation we heard a couple minutes before, Adam suggests what if alternates aren't even real? But given the prevalence we saw in 1992, it would be hard for anyone to doubt their existence. Unless the bans actually worked and made it more difficult for alternates to interact with humanity. Meaning, while yeah, it does seem totalitarian that things like a GPS or TV screen are illegal, it seems to at least partially be doing the job if alternates are now called into question. The two then finally make it to the house, and once they get there, we see that this is the house of Caesar Taurus, which means a couple things. For one, this is not the house of a girl who called earlier saying that her cat needed help passing into the afterlife. While you could say perhaps she bought it after Caesar's death some 16 years ago, the house is not lived in, indicating that it's not hers, and two, and more importantly, the house is still infested. See, whenever we left Caesar's house, that's where Mark picked up the alternate that eventually led to his death. So now, Adam and Jonah arriving there is not good. They then begin their 3-day stay at the house, beginning with night 1 on January the 12th of 2009. Again, this is our confirmation that Volume 2 takes place 16 years after Volume 1. As the two set up cameras and take pictures of the house, they come across a locked door. Other than that, however, the house seems completely empty. Both of them are considering ditching the house because they don't seem to find anything interesting until a scream is heard. When this scream is heard, the GPS gives an error code of 333. To the best of my understanding, this code generally indicates the presence of an alternate. After this evidence of paranormal or more likely alternate presence, Adam becomes interested and wants to stay while Jonah suggests that they leave. So that night, on night 2, Adam goes inside of the house while Jonah waits outside and monitors the cameras. It's noted for this footage that exposure to the blank causes video corruption. Again, most likely alternate. Adam begins to use a spirit box to try to communicate to whatever's inside of the house. However, as he's doing this, Jonah, who is operating the radio, suddenly screams, indicating that Jonah sees something on the security cameras. However, this message continues to loop over and over. Adam believes that Jonah's just playing a game, and as he begins to get worried, the video glitches out. Again, an indication of an alternate present. It's then that a third voice joins in on the radio. The voice says, "I've been watching you," as Adam and Jonah each think that it's the other one trying to mess with them. Before the voice continues, "I can see you," and the screen abruptly cuts.
What are you saying exactly? Dude, that's not funny. What's not funny?
The video then cuts to another biblical cartoon. This one of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Specifically, Adam's temptation to eat the apple. And as Adam begins to eat the apple, the serpent laughs to the side, happy that Adam has fell into temptation. This is so... We have Adam in our story, who is obsessed with these alternates. As soon as he hears the scream inside, he wants to go back inside. That's whenever he becomes interested, when there's actual danger present. And now, thanks to the message on the radio, we know that there's alternates there and that they have been watching Jonah and Adam. And this does nothing but get Adam more interested. He is obsessed with chasing the knowledge of what these alternates are. And that is shown as a parallel to the other Adam, the Adam in the garden, tasting of the forbidden fruit. I love that because in metaphysical awareness disorder, it says that the reason these people lose their mind and eventually end their life is because they have been exposed to knowledge which is not desired to be known. And Adam is now chasing that forbidden knowledge. He has to know what it means. And just as the other Adam chasing the fruit, it'll be his own demise. We then see a photo of where Adam is sleeping. And while it seems Adam's alone in this room, an alternate begins to speak to him. The alternate says, "You followed the shepherd. You are a fool. Follow my voice instead. You will find great happiness. Wake up, Adam. Don't make me wake the others." So I'm going to elaborate near the end of Volume 2 on why Adam's so important, but what this alternate tells Adam is interesting. A lot of people have taken that line that the alternate says, of "you follow the shepherd, you are a fool, follow me instead," to mean that there's two different factions of alternates who are warring against each other, and that they're vying for control over Adam. But I don't think that's true. Instead, I think that this is a false promise from an alternate who's promising to be better than the other alternates. Perhaps whenever the alternate says "you followed the shepherd," it's referring to the false shepherd, the ringleader of this whole circus. Or it could just mean the distractions and the forbidden fruit of the knowledge of the alternates themselves. Adam demanding to stay in the house in order to get more answers, even though it's very dangerous. Now, just as with the apple, the alternate is promising Adam great happiness if he just follows what he wants. That last line's the really interesting part. "Wake up, Adam, don't make me wake the others." And I'll get to what I think that means in just a second. We then see various pictures showing that something's moving throughout the house and opening doors, before Jonah says that Cam 3's out and asks Adam to go check it. When Adam leaves, an alternate appears in a flash of the camera and says, "Open your eyes," before perhaps the same or another alternate appears directly in front of the camera and begins to speak in garbled tongues. If you have your captions turned on, right after this alternate's done speaking, the text says, "Patients report multiple sleepless nights after their symptoms initially become apparent. It is not difficult to avoid, however. The patient must try to actively seek it out." This has to be in reference to MAD. Again, this disorder that makes people become depressed and lose themselves to the alternates, which is described as exposure to knowledge which is not wished to be known. I believe that whenever Adam leaves the room and this alternate appears in front of the camera and gives this entire garbled speech, that whatever this alternate is saying is the knowledge which is not wished to be known. Which is why immediately after it says it, we get an explanation on MAD. What's really interesting is that mention that it is not difficult to avoid and the patient has to seek it out. Now perhaps this is relating to everyone who has MAD, and everyone who is attacked by an alternate or given the knowledge by the alternate slowly begins to want to know that knowledge, and that's what it means by seek it out. Or it could be a reference to people like Adam specifically, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. We then cut back to the pictures that are being shared between the two on the cameras within the house, and we see an image numbered 333, which is blank with several question marks. Again, 333 being a reference to an alternate encounter. At this point, Adam is refusing to leave the house, while Jonah is terrified outside. So, Jonah and Adam begin to communicate to each other through the descriptions of these images. Jonah says, "Adam, why didn't you come back to the car after you tried talking to it?" Before continuing that he knows Adam is looking at these pictures and reading what Jonah's saying. Adam replies and says that the door that was once locked is now opened and he can hear the cat downstairs. We hear the cat continuing to meow as Adam takes a picture of writing on the wall which says, "Nothing is worth the risk." This being a reference to the police tape stating that nothing is worth the risk of an alternate encounter. The two then confront each other, and Ty and Gabriel killed the voice acting on this. I'll leave their Twitters in the description as well. Everyone gets description links this video. But the argument they have is brutal and they each act like it. Adam is almost snarky, nearly mocking Jonah for being afraid of the situation. But Jonah is horrified of what's going on and tries to inform Adam that Adam isn't immortal and one of these days he's going to get himself killed. Through the conversation, it seems like both of them have been personally affected by the alternate invasion.
You're not invincible, okay? I know you thought that when we started doing these fucking death marches, and nothing happened, and I get it, but this right here is real, and you should know that more than anybody!
During the argument, Jonah gets heated and says to Adam, "I wish we never looked for your blank because she's dead and gone." Adam becomes furious at this as Jonah continues and says that if he walks down those stairs, he would be joining her, and that if somehow Adam comes back, it wouldn't really be Adam. With this, Jonah drives away and leaves Adam at Caesar's house. So what did Jonah mean by that? I wish we never looked for her, and you'd be joining her if you go down those stairs. Well, this will be shown with evidence in just a minute, but I'll go ahead and tell you now that Adam was the child who was kidnapped by the intruder in Intruder Alert. If you'll remember in that video, we saw an intruder appeared in the TV, kidnapped the child, and then, distraught at the sight of her missing infant, the mother life. Adam was that child who went missing. Now we'll get answers to how all of that happened in just a minute, but what's interesting about that now is the implications and why the alternates talk to Adam in the way that they do. See, whenever I first watched Intruder Alert, I just assumed that those children were long gone. You know, theoretically, if a demon was to kidnap, what was it, like over 3,000 children? The fate of the children is dubious at best. However, that doesn't seem to be the case, as Adam is not only alive, but seems to have no memory of his encounter with an alternate, at least as far as we know. See, these alternates are different when it comes to Adam. And everything that we saw with Caesar and Mark and even Jonah, the alternates are hostile. They're trying to get you to be afraid. That seems to be their only objective, to get someone to remove themselves from the picture so that they can take their place. But with Adam, they're not trying to get him with a spirit of fear, they're trying to get him with the spirit of temptation. As the alternate told Adam, "Follow my voice, you will find great happiness here." The alternate told Adam to wake up and then said, "Don't make me wake the others." If you'll remember, Adam was not the only child who was kidnapped by an alternate. Again, there was over 3,000. So, did Adam forget something? Was there something that the alternate trained him to do or told him that he's lost sight of and now it wants him to wake up? And is Adam potentially one of thousands of sleeper agents who have the same information? And as the alternate says, he could wake the others. That's also what I meant in the caption about metaphysical awareness disorder, where it says that it's not difficult to avoid and that the patient must try to actively seek it out. Is that referring to people in Adam's condition, people who were kidnapped by alternates at a young age? Because if you'll realize, at no point in all of this was Adam afraid. Even though, quite naturally, as was Jonah's reaction, fear would be the natural reaction. But instead, Adam's stoic. He's more curious than anything. Maybe it's just because he's familiar with him, even if he's not really aware of it. It's also for this reason I do not think Jonah was kidnapped as a child. Again, it lines up that 16 years ago, Adam would have been a baby, and assumedly, Jonah would be in the same position. However, if Jonah was kidnapped at a young age, I imagine the alternates would treat him like Adam, instead of how we see they treat him in just a minute. So Adam is different. Adam's special. And now he's alone in the house with these alternates who he refuses to leave as Jonah's trying to get away. Adam then walks to the bottom of the staircase and sees a television with a cat on the screen. This is indicating that there never was a cat, and it was simply the alternate within the television mimicking one. The camera then cuts and we see that our new angle is from the ground. It seems that Adam is sitting in the floor staring at the television. In front of him is the face of the intruder. This is the same intruder who all those years ago kidnapped Adam from his family. Adam asks, "What are you?" And if you have your subtitles on, you can see that the intruder responds, "You don't remember me?" before scenes from the series and faces begin to flash. We then cut to a conversation with the spirit box, as it seems Adam is now just talking to the alternates in this basement. The alternate asks, "What have you done?" And Adam replies, "I did the right thing." I think Adam is vaguely aware that he was kidnapped by these alternates, but he doesn't remember whatever it is they want him to remember. He's not afraid of them. As a matter of fact, it seems he's made an active effort to fight against them. And I assume that's what the line of questioning means when the alternates ask, "What have you done?" and Adam says, "I did the right thing." In other words, turning from whatever they wanted him to do into the exact opposite. However, he doesn't remember the alternate directly. This raises the question, what is it that the alternates wanted with these kids? See, initially in Intruder Alert, I just assumed it was in order to make the parent distraught and the kids were just kind of a side effect of that. But it seems now they have some greater plan in mind. But whatever plan it was, Adam forgot, and now he won't wake up. Other voices of victims from throughout the series begin to say that nobody is coming to help you, and no one knows where you are. As they say this, Adam begins to try to radio Jonah and ask where he is. We then cut back to the TV as it displays the message, "Do you understand?" I think whenever the alternates began to threaten Adam by saying no one knows where you are and no one's going to help you, that they were actually talking about Jonah. I think that the alternates have bigger plans for Adam, and this would explain why after saying that, Adam immediately begins to think of Jonah. We then cut to Jonah, who is sobbing to himself as he's driving away, as text from the GPS begins to appear saying you left him behind, along with who are you running from? You left him to die. And finally, open your eyes. Jonah seems to be scared as he's screaming and crying over whatever this entity is. It seems that after leaving Caesar's house and not having the same mark of protection as Adam, Jonah took an alternate with him, explaining its corruption and presence now in the GPS, indicated by the error code 333. And then in our final shot of the video, we see that Jonah's car is parked on the side of the road as we hear a door open and seemingly the noise of Jonah being attacked. Now Jonah's name is symbolic as well. A lot of people think of Jonah as being the man who was swallowed by the big fish or the whale, and then the whale threw him up 3 days later. And while that's true, what a lot of people don't realize is why Jonah got to that position in the first place. See, in the biblical story of Jonah, Jonah was told by God to go to a city known as Nineveh and to preach the word of God. Jonah instead tries to run away from God and gets on a boat heading the opposite direction. It's while running away from his responsibilities that a great storm comes, which causes the men to blame Jonah and eventually throw him into the sea. While thrown into the sea, that's when the great fish swallows him and then takes him to Nineveh before throwing him up on the shore. So just as the biblical Jonah ran away from his responsibilities and was swallowed by a whale, it seems that this Jonah ran away from Adam and was swallowed by a whale in his own right. I think that Jonah is probably dead. I'm not positive on that. There's a chance that he's not. However, that end scene and the sound of him being attacked outside of the car alone on the side of the road at night is probably not good. And as I mentioned, Jonah does not have the same protection as Adam had. And if you'll remember, once alternates have taken physical form, they can pretty much do whatever they want. So it seems that perhaps an alternate took a physical form and then stowed away in Jonah's car as he traveled home. Again, Jonah could show up later, but for now my prediction is that he didn't make it. They don't have the same care for him as they do Adam. And because they were at Caesar's house, the alternate that killed Jonah could very well have been Caesar. Not that it necessarily matters, just interesting speculation. And on that note, I think that Adam is almost definitely alive. I don't think the alternates killed him in the basement of that house. They want him to wake up, not to replace him. I think the final message that we see Adam receives, the TV saying, "Do you understand?" is the alternates trying to remind Adam of his given purpose. Whatever kind of indoctrination they did to Adam and the other children they abducted is for some reason not as effective on Adam, and I think everything we see at the end of Volume 2 is them trying to wake him up. I fear that whatever the alternates wanted for Adam might have worked, because the teaser, if you'll remember the video I skipped over earlier to go straight to Volume 2, is of Adam praying to our Savior, and this audio is immediately followed up with by an intruder alert. So maybe this teaser happens after the events of Volume 2, and maybe Adam succumbed to his indoctrination. That's more so just speculation. The only thing I'm for sure is that Adam's alive at the end of the story, and Jonah's probably not. And with that, we can continue through the rest of the series. The next video is a short titled mymovie.mp4. It is made to look like a cheesy at-home ghost caught on tape video, before it cuts to random shots of dark hallways and creepy bedrooms. Soccer Game 2009 is the same way, as it's still photos of the Mandela Meerkats versus the Bythorn Badgers. I guess camera flip shows are not illegal in this universe. before we cut to what has to be illegal video of a dark yard as well as a dark room with the camera zooming in and out as if the recorder sees something. It also should be noted that this footage is said to have taken place on September the 23rd of 2009. That would mean that this is occurring 9 months after the events of Volume 2. These two shorts are just people who are having their own creepy encounters off to the side, because if you'll remember, this whole alternate thing is happening everywhere at once. So these two shorts further flesh out the world and show us that even though we're focusing on a few specific characters at a time, everyone's being affected by the alternate invasion, and these people who are paranoid of things going bump in the middle of the night have good reason to be. So now that we've seen in the year 2009 things are still going bad for pretty much everyone, let's rewind the clock back to 1992 and get a bit more information on how this all happened. And we'll do that with the last large episode of the series at the moment, Mandela Catalogue Volume 333. 333 opens with a view of a neighborhood that slowly zooms in until we see the house from Intruder Alert. Also, I'm so happy with watching this series develop. Like, the original Mandela Catalogue videos were done on a phone, just Alex editing them by himself. And now we've got 3D assets, and there's this overall world building and character development. By the time the series is done, we're gonna have to go to a theater to watch it. I'm so impressed. We then hear a mother named Lynn comforting a crying baby before she calls someone named Jude. Lynn says she can't get the baby to stop crying, and Jude begins to ask if it's the blank before Lynn says that it's been unplugged. Again, this being an implication of the TV, meaning that the TV has caused the child to be afraid, to the degree that the mother had to unplug it. We then see from recently filed divorce papers that these two are Jude and Lynn Murray. If you'll remember, Adam's name is Adam Murray, meaning that we are now viewing the story of Adam's parents, and Adam is the child crying in the background of this video. The date of the divorce is August 29th, 1992. This is within a week of Mark's torment at the hands of the alternates. As the parents continue to discuss their child, again Adam, we see the reflection of a television through someone's eye. As the reflection continues to flip through channels, we're then given the title card of 333. We're then taken to a news report from April the 4th of 1992. The promotion is of a Lieutenant Thatcher Davis and Sergeant Ruth Weaver. Davis, if you'll remember, was the police officer who was heading the investigation into Mark Heathcliff. We see during this speech for the Mandela County Sheriff's Department that Davis promises to do right by the people. We're then taken to a phone call from a school receptionist who is calling the police, specifically Davis, to tell them that Mark Heathcliff has been missing school for several days. This causes Davis to check out Mark's residence, and the body of Mark is found. Davis begins to take evidence from the crime scene. We see several of the effects of Mark's torment in the evidence that follows. There are shell casings all over the bed, implying that he was shooting at something, potentially trying to kill the alternates, but as we know, that didn't work. Along with the shell casings, we see that the TV is playing static and there is a video recorder on top of it. Along with that, we also see a Bible, as well as a book that reads Reassurances with God Bless All written underneath the title. We then cut back to the police department, where Sergeant Ruth is telling Davis that he should just let the case go because he's promoted and doesn't need to worry about it anymore. However, Davis feels invested in this case and keeps digging. We then see that there were 2 sets of fingerprints within Mark's room. One of those is Mark, which makes sense, but the other one is of this person, whose fingerprints were only found on the doorknob. Is this the alternate that eventually took Mark's place? It's Caesar, because he's wearing a bow tie as we saw in the image of Caesar from Volume 1, or more specifically Caesar's alternate. We then see the evidence files of things with Mark's fingerprints, such as the gun and camcorder that Mark used. One of the tapes from the camcorder is called Shadows Under the Door. It's dated for September 14th of 1992, which again lines up with the timeline of when Mark was trapped in his house. We see a shadow come underneath the doorway and begin rapidly knocking on the door. The shadow, which is an alternate, continues to knock faster before the camera cuts. We then hear a cassette player of an audio recording titled Voices Outside My Room. Again, this was taken by Mark while he was being tormented by the alternates. The first message says, "I'm not going away, open the door." The next message is more bizarre. It's clearly alternates because of the nature of the recording itself as well as the disjointed voices, but the alternates seem to be communicating with each other, asking what time it is before saying that they're nervous about the time, To which another alternate says, "Don't be nervous about the time, you have loads of time." Possibly referring that it's taking too long to get Mark to hurry up and allow them to take his place. And then the third recording may be my favorite moment in the entirety of the Mandela Catalogue, because it's just simply this. There are so many different ways you can make this. My initial interpretation is the idea that Mark is inside of his room, right? And he has no concept other than horror of whatever this thing is that keeps trying to either get him to come out or to end it all. And then they start having weird conversations about the time, and it's like they don't know how to use human voices correctly. And then just a legion, a giant crowd of people. It sounds like a huge gala or party. It's either all of the voices that they've taken from their previous victims, or this is just conversations between the legions of hell. Because if these alternates can appear wherever they want and communicate with each other, and once they have a way in, you have access to whatever they're doing, it could be thousands and thousands of them. And perhaps what's most terrifying about it is they're not vicious, they're not trying to tear down his door or scare him with the sounds of screams or gunshots or anything like that. They're all just talking to each other as if it's entertainment. It's like, as mentioned, you have loads of time, that they don't need to hurry up or get Mark to do anything now because his fate's inevitable. Just as Noah on the ark had no other option and the false shepherd told him that it would be his last message, and everyone else in the series who has been attached to by an alternate, the alternates know that Mark's fate is helpless, so they're just biding their time because Mark has no hope. What a horrific concept. That was the thing that kind of hit home for me of how hopeless this situation is, because like I said, it's the armies of hell, but they're in no rush because they know they've already won. Again, moving on from that earth-shattering terror, let's get into another one. We then see the writings of the Reinsurance's notebook. These are the last written words of Mark Heathcliff. Initially, Mark reminds himself of God's love and says that he needs God's love in this time of turmoil. It's very clear through his writings that Mark's afraid. This explains why he kept trying to go back to church to find answers, why he was reading his Bible whenever he was afraid, and why now he is trying to remind himself that God is with him. However, if you'll remember, in the world of the Mandela Catalogue, that is not the person who is the face of religion. It is instead the false shepherd. So instead of a benevolent and loving God, it is a wicked one. Mark begins to realize this as he writes in his notebook that nobody came to save him and that whoever reads this has to stop it, before dreadfully remarking, "Who have I been praying to?" That further compounds on the thing I was talking about the voices outside the door. It only compounds to know that not only do they not have to do anything, but whenever you ask for help, it's them you're asking help from. We then see a series of mad scribbles before we get the final message from Mark that says, "My eyes are wide open." We then see posters along the brick wall, one of them being for a game between the Mandela Meerkats and the Brighton Bunnies. Again, this lines up with the short from the My Soccer movie, at least the Mandela Meerkats part. Also, the bottom of the soccer poster implies that the proceeds will go to the Mandela Grieving Parents Foundation, which, if the demons are kidnapping so many children that there's a foundation for the sad parents, yeah, I really got nothing. That's just bad. I don't know what else to tell you. On the other side of the picture, we see a Mandela County Police Department recruitment form, but most importantly, right in the middle, we have an alternate report for Cesar Torres. Again, we understand that Caesar has been an alternate since the events of Volume 1, but this is further showing that alternates are enough of an issue that the police issue reports for people who may be them. We then get to another evidence reel. This one is of the Murray investigation. Again, Murray, if you'll remember, is the family of Lynn, Jude, and Adam. Adam at the time only being around a year old. It opens with a message from Mandela Tech Daily. The man sporting this fantastic disguise is Dave Lee. Dave Lee explains that he was doing a video recovery for Lieutenant Davis. He explains that this footage is for the investigation, however he was only able to salvage a couple minutes of the footage. So what follows is a tape that was recovered from the Murray household. This tape is called The Might of the Subconscious. This is also one of the best moments in the entire series. We're greeted by a character named Stanley. Stanley is based off of Jim Henson's character known as Limbo. If you're on the weird side of the internet like I am, that has to do with like childhood trauma and creepy kid shows, then you've probably seen this face before. But Limbo was known for appearing on early episodes of Sesame Street. And just like Limbo, Stanley here is meant to talk to children. Stanley shows up and begins to talk to the child watching that he can help them form imaginary friends. Stanley tells the child to close their eyes and imagine what they want their imaginary friend to look like. Stanley tells them to think really hard and don't be afraid because they're just as scared as you are. Before Stanley finishes by saying that it worked and your new friend is somewhere in your house.
How many friends do you have?
For one, before I get into the analysis of it, this was the most viscerally fearful moment in the entire series for me. And while yes, the audio tape of the many voices bothered me like when I think about it, and I think is the best part, at least in a horror sense, of the whole series, this one was the most immediate jump scare because I was really into the video, as you could imagine, and was on the couch. I was next to Kayla and the lights were off and I was very intently staring at the screen, and as soon as the screen went black and Stanley said, "Your imaginary friend is somewhere in your house," my dog knocked over a chair and a bunch of pans in the kitchen. So as soon as I heard there's someone in your house, everything fell apart, and I thought it was now a self-defense situation. So thanks, Alex. I'll be sure to mail you my hospital bills when I inevitably keel over. Unironically though, the Stanley part is fantastic. The idea of the devil talking to children through a face that in the real world is often associated with a spacey sort of childhood traumatic memory that has to do with creepy faces that follow you into your dreams, and then using that for the mobile of the imaginary character coming to life through your horror story. The Stanley tape is incredibly important because it answers the question that's been asked since Intruder Alert. If alternates cannot interact with people until they cross over into our plane of existence, then how did they kidnap so many children? Supposedly before any of the deaths took place. And as we see from the Stanley video, they don't have to. It's any form of invitation. See, if the alternate is through the television screen, tormenting you, giving you information which is not wished to be desired, trying to copy your form, then in that case, taking yourself out of the picture causes the alternate to be invited into our realm. The other thing that invites an alternate into our realm is a child's imagination. So when the terror and grief wasn't working enough, the alternates appeared, again as seen in Intruder Alert, and caused the child to imagine their own monster. These monsters appeared, kidnapped the children, and then, distraught at the sight of their missing infant, the gateway was made for more alternates, which doubles down on the tragedy of Adam's character. Not only was he kidnapped as a child and seemingly forgot whatever the alternates taught him, but all of this is his own fault, because as a child, he imagined the imaginary friend that became an alternate, kidnapped him, led him through whatever happened to him after he was kidnapped, as well as the death of his mother, and as we'll see in a second, his father as well. All of Adam's troubles began with Adam because he's the one who, even if he was just a child and didn't know what he was doing, invited the alternate into our world. This is also a super terrifying concept, because now not only do alternates have to look like a distorted version of you, they look like whatever distorted thing a child dreams up in their imagination. And as we see, Adam's invited alternate quickly gets to work. We cut to a call between Jude Murray, again Adam's father, and Lieutenant Davis. Jude is afraid and begins to say that someone is in his house. Jude is terrified and says, "I don't know how it got out, the windows have been locked for months." Perhaps Jude knows that this creature came from the television and that's what he means by "it got out." Because again, at this point, people know what alternates are. Davis seems rather calm, asking what this creature's doing, and Jude says that it's just in the corner and he believes that his wife Lynn has been hurt. Jude remarks that he doesn't want to look at its face again. Davis then asks the question, again assuming this to be a normal alternate, does it resemble anyone you know? So whenever Jude replies, "It doesn't look like anyone I've ever seen," Davis freaks out. This is understandable, right? Because this is whenever they start to figure out, just like we are right now, that children can unknowingly invite alternates into our reality. So while Davis is just assuming this is a normal alternate encounter with a doppelganger or wannabe doppelganger, and as we saw from previous videos, police procedure is to do nothing and let the person die because, again, nothing is worth the risk. Whenever he sees this is something else, he panics. So he begins talking to Ruth, saying that he needs assistance at this household, and then whenever he goes back to talk to Jude, Jude isn't there anymore. Davis comes over to the house and Ruth says that several of the people who showed up are too afraid to go in. This is then when the pictures and events at the end of Home Intruder take place. Davis goes inside, sets up a camera, the camera begins to take pictures, and that's whenever the event happens where the corpse of Lynn Murray is tampered with. At least that corpse is tampered with after Davis and Weaver make entry into the house. When Davis and Weaver enter the Murray household, they see that the TV is playing static along with the song that, as mentioned earlier, indicates an alternate's presence. In the side, Lynn can be seen hanging. Again, this is following the events of Intruder Alert. While Davis is walking around and Ruth goes to investigate something, Ruth quits responding to Davis. Davis begins to panic and to call out to whatever's in the dark, and whatever's in the dark begins to mimic his voice back to him, before beginning to repeat the phone call between Jude and Davis that we heard earlier. It seems that whatever this thing is that's in the dark, it's trying to learn speech patterns and copy the voices of those around it. This thing in the dark begins to sprint at Davis before it stops, and we can hear a ghastly rendition of Amazing Grace as it slowly lurches its lanky arm around the doorway. This is Adam's imaginary friend, the alternate that he brought into our reality. At this point, it has kidnapped Adam, caused the death of Lynn, and has supposedly killed Jude and Ruth as well. And now, it's learning how to be human. Davis begins to run away and over the radio tells Ruth that if she's still in there, to get out and meet him at the station. Again, it seems that Ruth didn't make it. We then cut back to the police department as Davis is hurriedly trying to call the local counties to send reinforcements. We then cut back to a house, again supposedly the Murray house, as the song Amazing Grace gets louder, before the song is carried over to the police station, indicating that this alternate from the Murray household followed Davis to the station. As Davis is walking through the station, it appears in front of him using the stolen voices of the people it's killed. One voice says, "You're too late," this is presumably Jude. Another voice says, "You left me behind," supposedly Ruth, along with general mockings of Davis such as, "This town is in shambles because of you." And if there is any doubt into the idea that this is an imaginary friend of a child who was created by a child's imagination, then the confirmation comes from the most haunting and final lines that this alternate says. Again, it uses the voices of those it's either killed or heard. The alternate says, "Mommy, want to meet my best friend? He likes to hide, but he wants to meet you. I want to play with the man in the TV." The alternate then moves towards Davis as the screen cuts to black and it says, "Uh-oh, bad decision, Thatcher," mimicking the words that were told to Mark before Mark suffered a similar fate. As this lanky creature, the amalgamation of a child's imagination of what a friend could be, lurks over Davis's location, if you have your closed captions on, you see the names Cesar Torres, Ruth Weaver, and Mark Heathcliff scroll by, 3 victims of the recent alternate takeover, all added to the collective of this alternate hive mind. We then see the message, "There's not enough room for the 2 of us, Lieutenant," and we see Ruth Weaver's face dissolve to nothing. The camera then takes us to the motto of the Mandela County Police Department, "Every day gets brighter," and then finally we end back on that eye watching the TV.
Stop or I'll shoot! I said stay back!
So, wasn't that something? So a lot happened there at the end. Again, the horrifying realization that you don't even have to succumb to mad for one of these things to get to you. You just have to exist. Because even if you're really smart, and even if you take all the precautions to keep the alternates away, there's a child watching a TV somewhere who's probably still going to let it in. So at the end of 333, we see the end stages of this alternate attack. It's to the degree that they are directly attacking the police department, and it seems no one is safe. We'll get to Davis's fate in just a minute, but again, I want to raise the question of what did it do with Adam? Adam created this thing, at least the visage of it, brought it over into our world, and then seemingly Adam disappeared, leaving enough time between that disappearance for his mother to succumb to MAD. So where is Adam during this time? I don't know. I'd really like to find out. There is one final note with this episode. If you wait around till after the end credits, you see the statue of Simon of Cyrene helping Jesus carry his cross. As this image is shown, the false shepherd appears. Now, to be honest, I'm sure the Simon of Cyrene statue has something to do with symbolism that's cool, and I like it. But for now, my main takeaway is that the false shepherd is still behind all of this, controlling everything from behind the scenes. So before we get into the final thoughts, let's talk about the final piece of media at the moment from Alex Kister, and that is Every Day Gets Brighter. Every Day Gets Brighter opens with, again, a shot of the Mandela County Police Department, and an audio recording begins that is surprisingly the voice of Lieutenant Davis. Davis survived his confrontation with the alternate at the end of 333. He sounds broken and attacked, but he's still alive, while remarking that the alternates have taken everything. Davis says that he can't be bothered or scared, because then who will the people look to? Perhaps the reason David managed to survive his encounter is because he wasn't truly afraid. Maybe MAD has to take over the individual, at least to some degree. Davis remarks that people want to know where their loved ones went, but that he has no clue where they went. Again, leading into the question of where's Adam. David says that it took something from me, and no one can know what it's like to see a perfect copy of yourself walking away. Now, this is one of the most revolutionary things in the entire series. We knew because of Intruder Alert that there was some way that these supposed only non-physical creatures through the TV had to kidnap children. So whenever we figure out the children can imagine an alternate and then it comes to life, that lines up. But we have always assumed that the doppelgangers cannot take your position until you're dead, right? And that the most they can do is just try to look like you. That's why if you see something that resembles you, run away and hide, because the thought has been, it's going to kill you so that it can fully take your position. But as we see here, it's a perfect copy, and it already fully took Davis's position. But Davis is still alive. This means that the alternates don't even need you gone in order to take your place. Of course, it's easier to do so, as they said, there isn't room for the both of us, but it can be your perfect copy without you even being gone. So I went to Alex with this because, I felt pretty confident in all my theories from the first video, and then you don't have to be dead to have a perfect doppelganger, so I panicked and was crying and screaming and throwing up to him. And he told me, simply, go back and watch Metaphysical Awareness Disorder. The reason he said that is because I brought up the point, if the alternates don't need you out of the way, then why do they try to get you to end yourself? Again, he told me to check out the MAD video and be on the lookout for a statistic. That statistic, according to my opinion, is the fact that 97% of people who encounter MAD end up taking their own life. However, that final note is that 3% of people reverse the delusion. I believe that MAD is more of a side effect to these alternates' control. All they need is to get into our world. If they can do that through the television and convincing you to take yourself out and then take your place, that works. But now, as we see, they can also get a child to do their bidding without the child even knowing it. So maybe MAD is just a side effect of these creatures that are already in our world, giving someone forbidden knowledge and then copying their visage and walking away. However, the 3% that reverse the delusion is interesting. Perhaps the reason these alternates still want you to be very afraid, even though they could attack you, as seen in this episode and previous examples like Caesar's mom, is because if you overcome that forbidden knowledge, you may be able to fight back, or reverse the delusion that the alternate has created. Again, this is new information and I'm just theorizing with the pieces that I have and the breadcrumbs that Alex has given me, but perhaps if one overcomes MAD, there is a way to fight back. And maybe the alternates know that, and that's why they still want you gone. Maybe Adam knows that. Maybe that's why he wasn't afraid. Who's to say? I'm just excited. There's so many pieces. I don't know how it fits yet, but I'm spitballing and throwing stuff together and using glue to put the puzzle pieces, and hopefully you all can figure out whatever all this word vomit is, but I think it's neat. At the end of Every Day Gets Brighter, Davis says that he's determined to kill it. Again, going back on the idea that perhaps if you can overcome MAD, you can take your place back. And again, if there's not room for the two of us, maybe you can be the one victor. I also want to mention, I was talking to Alex about this series, and I was like, hey, isn't it weird that the Intruder from Mark's childhood never showed back up in all the recent episodes? And Alex was like, oh, you haven't seen the latest video? To which I noticed in Every Day Gets Brighter that this guy is the intruder from Mark's childhood. And I cannot properly convey to you the amount of torment and personal hatred and respect I have for this thing. Because for those that don't know, this is my one claim to fame in the entire Mandela Catalogue. I originally used the picture of the hoodie police sketch for one of my conspiracy iceberg videos, and Alex saw it and then used it as the intruder image because of that. So I technically created this piece of torment in my life. Just like Adam brought the alternate into his world, I brought this thing into my world. And now, as I'm trying to put together all the puzzle pieces, I believe I understand how doppelgangers work, I believe I understand how intruders work, pretty sure I've got the false shepherd down and all of that. It's this one guy in a hoodie who lives in people's stairs like he's Harry Potter that I can't figure out. And then sure enough, after I've put together everything, that I'm pretty confident how MAD works, pretty confident how the imaginary friends work, and all of that, there he is. There's his stupid face, and it looks creepy, and it is terrifying, but I'm more upset than scared. Because here he is at the end, just to stand there and be like, haha, forgot about me, idiot. And the worst part is that I invented at least the look. Alex has all the credit for the writing, but he looks that way, with that smug face and that smug hoodie, and I did that. And it drives me crazy. Because he's the one, I feel like if I can figure him out, a lot of the stuff is going to link together a lot easier. I could be wrong, it could be not at all. But just because I conjured this dogma into my life, I feel like he's the problem. And I did it to myself, and I can't blame anyone else. The series is really good. I just hate it.
David, you have already done all of my bidding for me.
Let's get into it, starting with Interlude. Interlude is another one of the short episodes that occur between the larger volumes of the Mandela Catalogue. Interlude opens with a series of pictures of houses and the Mandela County Police Department. This is very similar to the framing we saw in Volume 3. We also get a logo for the Bythorn Paranormal Society with a subtitle that says Production 2007. As we'll learn, 2007 is when the society began. We then see that someone named Sarah is sending Adam videos from the Mandela County Police files. We don't know this yet, but Sarah, as confirmed by Volume 4 and the website, which is something I'll talk about in a minute, is the sister of Mark Heathcliff. If you'll remember, Mark was the first victim of the alternate attack that we ever saw all the way back in Volume 1. Mark died in 1992. And his little sister Sarah would grow up to one day begin a society specifically tasked with investigating and trying to destroy the alternate presence. Which is so interesting that the little sister of the first victim we ever see in the entire series would one day grow up to begin the organization that is the main opposition to the alternates. The idea that the sister who lost her brother to this alternate invasion would be a fugitive from the law because she wants to take down the things that killed her brother. It's just like little elements that put together a complete picture of this world that I love. I'm a fangirl for it. Anyway, Sarah's sending these police files to Adam, and these files begin with a message from the Department of Temporal Phenomena. Now, we still don't know a ton about the Department of Temporal Phenomena, although it's my guess they're not to be trusted, or at least all of them aren't to be trusted. Specifically, the department says that an unforeseen threat has been eliminated in reference to the alternates. Now, while this could be a message that because people are destroying their television sets, because alternates use it as a gateway to travel into our reality, that because of people's compliance, the alternate threat is going away, we know from the events that we're about to see that it is not going away. So the department is either misguided or in with the alternates. We then see a slide that says in the beginning before we see a chart of alternate assimilation. As we know, alternates mimic the form of people in order to replace them within reality. However, what we didn't know up until this point is the different levels of this assimilation. We knew that there were different types of alternates. There were those that were a perfect match to humans and those that were a very unperfect match. But now for the first time we see specifics of that transformation. The first thing we see is a flawed assimilation. It looks like this is what happens whenever an alternate tries to mimic a person but doesn't get all the features right. Kind of like a printer running out of ink midway through a copy. After that, in the middle of the graph, we see a complete assimilation. This is supposedly what the alternates want, to be a perfect one-to-one copy of the human they're trying to mimic, to the degree that it is unidentifiable. So if at the beginning of the graph we had what happens whenever there isn't enough assimilation, in the middle we have the perfect amount of assimilation, then on the far end we have what happens when there's too much assimilation, or as it's described here, overdriven. And for the overdriven, we see a nun and the thing that Adam saw in the house in Volume 2. This is the creature that appeared in front of Adam and whispered to him before we had the text displayed that described metaphysical awareness disorder, or what we believe to be the disorder people have who survive an alternate encounter.
How relevant is metaphysical awareness disorder? And were people like me kind of leading others astray on what it meant at one point?
Metaphysical awareness disorder is huge, and I feel like everyone looks over it. That's all I'll say. I feel like nobody mentions it, especially with some recent stuff. It plays a huge part, but nobody talks about it. That's all I'll say.
Write that down, write that down.
So it seems here that this overdriven alternate has taken on too many details of the nun it tried to mimic. You can kind of make out where these features came from. The white face of the alternate surrounded by the black shroud kind of looks like a nun's headdress. But obviously the details of it have been applied and twisted in a way it was never meant to be, hence overdriven. But if that alternate is a mimic of that nun, then what was it doing in the house with Adam? The screen then cuts and we hear screaming as we see a red outline around the window of Adam's house. We then see a shot of the church that Mark went to in Exhibition. Exhibition being the video that showed the final days of Mark's life and the fact that in his final moments he tried to go to a church for some reason. And then finally we see an image of just the nun with the text next to it reading, "A messenger." Now, I've got a pretty good idea as to what all this means, and as a matter of fact, I think it's one of the coolest developments in the entire series. And if this is going where I think it's going, we're all in for a real treat. However, none of my ideas around Interlude will make any sense unless you see Volume 4. So keep everything I just mentioned in mind, the text that says in the beginning, the overdriven assimilation, the picture of Mark's house, as well as the picture of the church, because they're all going to come back in a big way whenever I make some big, crazy, harebrained conspiracy theory that, again, Alex is going to destroy whenever the next episode comes out. But for now, I feel smart. So while I'm feeling smart, I guess, we're going to move in to Volume 4. And as we move into Volume 4, there's a few questions I want you to keep in mind that we're going to try to answer as we get through this. The first one being, as mentioned earlier, especially in Volume 2, Adam is special. We see in Volume 3 that he was responsible for the death of his parents because he allowed the man in the TV to become real, kill them, and eventually kill Lieutenant Davis's partner, Ruth Weaver. Now, of course, Adam was an infant and didn't understand what he was doing. However, that means that Adam is inherently tied to these creatures. And whatever metaphysical awareness disorder or whatever these alternates' grand scheme is, has to somehow correlate with Adam. So why is Adam special, and why doesn't he remember whatever the alternate said he was supposed to remember? The second question I want you to ask yourself is about Thatcher Davis. If Davis was such an important figure in the community, and supposedly one of the only people who can stop the alternates, then why did the alternate in the police station at the end of Volume 3 assimilate him, but allow him to live? And then finally, the final question that arises from Interlude. If this hooded figure is an assimilation of this nun, and this nun is known as a messenger, then she's a messenger for what? And while you're busy trying to put all that together, let's get into Volume 4. Volume 4 opens with a storybook drawing of the 7 days of the biblical creation. We have the normal steps, like God created the light, the water, the land, until while showing the land, whenever the trees begin to sprout out of the earth, we see in the background that the false Gabriel, the main antagonist of this entire series, appears behind a tree in a flash, before disappearing, leaving the tree as a dead husk. We then see Adam and Eve, and all appears fine in the story until one night after they go to sleep, we see text that reads, "Awaken, my son." We see Adam wander through the darkness of night until he sees the false Gabriel off in the tree line, waiting for him. And as Adam approaches, the fog dissipates to reveal an apple lying on the ground. After this, we see that Eve wakes up and is terrified that when she stares into the night sky, the man looking back at her isn't the Adam she once knew. We then cut to the modern day with a title card for Volume 4 as we hear radio chatter of people discussing technology and all its benefits. Again, as we know, in the world of the Mandela Catalogue, technology has been outlawed as it allows alternates to seep into our reality. We then hear a phone call from Dave Lee, the owner of Mandela Tech. In Volume 3, whenever we saw the video recording of Stanley, the face in the television that made Adam materialize an imaginary friend into the real world, the tape was prefaced with a message by Dave Lee to Lieutenant Thatcher. It seems that Lieutenant Thatcher has been bringing these videotapes to Dave, and Dave has been repairing them and then giving them back to Thatcher. So it seems that Dave is privy to the alternate takeover, or at the very least, the alternate's effect on technology. Dave is on the phone with a man named O'Brien, who seems to be the leader of a church band. O'Brien says that everything's going great at church and asks Dave how the business is doing. Since Dave owns a tech shop and technology has now, for the most part, been outlawed, business is doing about as expected. O'Brien seems sympathetic of this and tells Dave that if he ever needs a job, he'd be happy to hire him at the church. Dave says that he's not religious, but O'Brien says it doesn't matter, and that the church welcomes anyone. Now, if you've been keeping up with the lore of the Mandela Catalogue, church is not a good thing, because all religions have been replaced by this alternate takeover. But I'm jumping the gun a bit, we'll get back to that in a minute. In the meantime, while all this is happening, we see someone else at the tech store with Dave start going through a box of VHS tapes. We'll get confirmation as to who this is in a minute, but I'll go ahead and tell you now that this woman is named Evelyn, and she is the ex-girlfriend of Adam Murray. So, Evelyn is familiar with the Bythorn Paranormal Society and at least some level of the alternate's influence in the world. I mean, considering that television is now outlawed, I imagine that a lot of people are aware of the alternates to some degree. While going through the box of VHS tapes, she finds one that has a note on it reading, "Dave, same old procedure, drop off when you're done, Thatcher." Evelyn, deathly curious as to what this tape might be, steals it for herself. Also, while we're on the scene, I just want to mention how much I love how the series has progressed all the way to live action segments now.
You know how it is.
Oh!
I'm sure you've seen it.
We got boys. We graduating. We moving up in the world. You see that? We went from pictures of real people to like shots of real people and whatever, and then like short like live acted out clips, and now we got our man's Alex as Dave, the OG, on camera. And I also love the aesthetic of it. It's not just like, you know, he set up a camera and did a video, although I'm sure that would be great if he wanted it to, but it has a very like Sin City vibe to it. Like everything we're seeing is almost dreamlike. It's in a world that shouldn't be. And I think it's really cool. Anyway, I'm just nerding out. Moving on. We then see Evelyn sneak into a back room at Mandela Tech, where it appears that, despite them being illegal, Dave has kept a television set for himself. There's also a sign leaned up on the wall that says the only CRT TV in Wisconsin. And while this may lead you to believe that perhaps since Dave owns a tech store, he has a sort of permit to keep this one television set, keep in mind that this sign is laying in the back room and not out front with all the others. What I gather from this is that for a while, Dave was allowed to have a television, but then the state effectively told him to get rid of it. So he is now hiding it in the back with a cover over it, along with the sign that used to hang out front. Also little touches, like everything being 70% off in the store because Dave's going out of business, and the empty parking lot to indicate that there's no customers. Great stuff. So Evelyn begins the video, and we see that it is the toddler stress assessment from all the way back in Volume 1. Which makes sense because the toddler stress assessment video related to the alternate takeover because it was being shown at the same time children were being abducted by alternates. And again, Dave and Thatcher are trading back and forth videos that have to do with alternates. However, this is very not good for Evelyn because if you'll remember, the whole reason televisions got outlawed is because
if someone views an alternate through them or allows alternate influence to come in through the television, it can cause alternates to appear in the real world, which is very not good. And now, Evelyn is watching videos related to alternates, which is very not good. We then see that the person scribbling this is Lieutenant Thatcher Davis. We see Thatcher look through several cabinets before remarking that there's no food. Again, Thatcher is in hiding and it seems living off scraps. We then hear an interview from Bythorn High Daily News of Sarah Heathcliff. We hear in the video that in 2007, Sarah was the founder of the Bythorn Paranormal Club. Again, love the idea that the sister of the guy who kickstarted this whole series is the one who is leading the series into its future. In the video, she says that she is looking for other people to join and to please email her if you're interested. And one of the people who email her is Adam Murray. We also in this time see pictures of both Sarah and Adam that say currently at large. Again, members of the Bythorn Paranormal Society are wanted because they are investigating the alternate invasion. And on July the 10th of 2007, we see that Adam became a member of the Bythorn Paranormal Society, which at the time, since his email says Adam Murray 88, he would have been 19 years old. Adam and Sarah also announced that they are now turning the Bythorn Paranormal Club into the Bythorn Paranormal Society, meaning it's no longer just a little high school club, it is now an investigative group for people of the region. Again, this is all back in 2007 before they became wanted. The events of Volume 2, whenever Jonah died, are in 2009. We then see that on July the 14th of 2007, only 4 days after Adam became a part of the BPS, he takes Sarah on an investigation that he scouted out himself. What is this paranormal encounter that Adam scoped out? A police crime scene. So Adam takes Sarah, a girl he just met, to an active police crime scene and plays an audio lure, which is just noises of people screaming, and as he does, hands of alternates begin to pour out of doorways down the hallway. If you remember, alternates' eventual goal is to assimilate humans, and they most often do that through human suffering, hence the whole there isn't enough room for the two of us, and trying to make people go crazy. So Adam is so gung-ho about finding these things and doesn't care what he has to do it, that he went to a place where someone probably just died to an alternate and then plays noises of people screaming so he can get footage of their hands coming out of the walls. Sarah takes this about, as you could imagine. Sarah is furious and says she's never going out on a job with Adam again, and that if he wants to keep doing these investigations, that she'll run everything else, but he's got to find a new partner. As we know, that partner was Jonah. And as we also know, it didn't turn out well for him either. With all that in mind, we then cut to 2 years later, 2009, just after the events of Volume 2. As a matter of fact, we cut to right after the events of Volume 2, with Adam driving home without Jonah in the car. When Adam gets home, we then get a point of view of his computer screen. There's also a lot of questions about what is and isn't allowed in the Mandela Catalogue, because we've heard from previous stuff that screens and televisions aren't allowed, but now people can just message on computers. Well, from the audio that we heard at the title card at the beginning of Volume 4, we hear what sounds like people on the radio mention that this new digital technology makes their family feel much safer and seems to be more usable and less dangerous. It seems that what was outlawed was analog technology, so old television sets or anything that was not modern digital tech. So it seems that now people are allowed to have things like computers, even though televisions and, as mentioned in Volume 2, things like a GPS are still banned. Further leans back into my theory that the government doesn't know what they're talking about, as they're kind of just picking and choosing what is and isn't allowed. What is the status of technology in the Mandela Catalogue?
There is kind of a difference between the analog and digital laws, I guess you could say. I suppose that's really the most I can say about that as of now.
Okay, alright. So basically the stuff that's been outlawed is the stuff that they know the alternates to exist within. Anyway, so the first thing that Adam does when he gets home, remember, A few hours ago, Jonah died. The first thing he does is delete Jonah from his contacts. We see throughout the series that Adam is obsessed with getting to the root of what these alternates are and is willing to do whatever it takes to get footage of them. But when it comes to caring about anything or anyone else, no. We also see Sarah and Evelyn in Adam's recent messages. Evelyn asking if they can talk it through before then sending another message and asking for closure. Again, as mentioned, we're going to see that Evelyn and Adam are exes. Adam ignores this and begins to talk to Sarah, asking if she wants the good news or the bad news first. Good news being that he got some cool footage, bad news being Jonah's dead on the side of the interstate. Adam almost lies and says that Jonah bailed. However, he backtracks and instead decides to tell the truth, albeit passive-aggressively, as he says, Jonah bailed and I'm pretty sure he's dead or something. Sarah is, as you can imagine, upset by this and tells Adam to call her. During the phone call, we find out that Adam was walking back home and came across the abandoned car and supposedly Jonah's lifeless body, and Adam got in the car and drove away. Like, this man is irredeemable. Like, legit, this guy was just walking along the side of the road and saw his friend's lifeless body on the ground and thought, man, I get a free car. Sarah is mad and says that Adam has to make a video to tell everyone that Jonah's gone. Adam gets mad and hangs up, and Sarah sends him a message saying, no wonder Evelyn left you. Which, if it was anyone else, I would say that message would hurt his feelings. But I don't think Adam has many of those. We then cut back to Thatcher, and while we hear a narration from him, we see things like a Mandela County population trend, showing that in 2009, Mandela County is down to 1,075 residents. Again, all an effect of the demonic takeover. While Thatcher is talking about the alternate takeover and how he feels partially responsible for it, we see things like a mountain of missing persons files. Specifically, Thatcher feels responsible for Ruth Weaver's death. We also see that in the lobby there is an in remembrance sign with pictures of Ruth and Thatcher's faces. Again, further showing us that the general public believes Thatcher to be dead. On the website for the Mandela County Police Department, there is a mention that the website will not be kept up after 2004. Now, while this could mean that, technology was getting banned and they're not going to continue to contribute to it, but it could also mean that the Mandela County Police Department shut down. And that would make sense considering the population of Mandela County got to be so low that it would make more sense for surrounding counties to just begin policing it rather than have a dedicated police force for that one town, if they even had the manpower for a dedicated police force. So I think that because of that, and also because of events we're going to see here in a minute, that the police department is abandoned and Thatcher's just living in the remnants of it. We then get what was, for me, one of the most brutal scares in the whole series, as whenever Thatcher goes to bed, he sees something in the closet at the end of the bed, and if you look closely, you will see the face of Ruth Weaver's alternate, but the alternate doesn't do anything. It just watches him, and it seems Thatcher is living in a perpetual state of fear. We then cut back to Dave Lee and hear in a phone call that he has fired Evelyn because he can no longer afford to keep her at the shop as Mandela Tech is having to shut down. At least that's the reason he gives Evelyn. We see as this phone call is being played that he finds that she saw the television set, and that more importantly, she used it to watch one of the tapes. Now Dave is shocked and horrified by this because he understands the gravity of what can happen if an alternate enters the world. So while he tells Evelyn the reason she has to leave is because he can't afford to keep her anymore, the actual reason is because she needs to stay far away from any kind of television at all. This is further emphasized when Dave said that he has a friend who used to work at the police station and he'll put in a good word for Evelyn, effectively hoping that Thatcher can keep her safe because she's opened up her mind to alternate intrusion. And this is even more emphasized when Evelyn straight up asks him on the phone why he had a TV set and what was on the tape, and Dave promptly hangs up. After this, Dave calls O'Brien and says he's going to take him up on his offer to work at the church. See, Dave was trying to maintain some aspects of technology, like the television set, in order to try to fight this alternate takeover with Thatcher. However, he now sees that because of this crusade, he might have gotten Evelyn killed, so he decides to stop it altogether. We then see what happened in the moments after Thatcher's alternate encounter in Volume 3. We saw Thatcher fire the gun and the alternate stand on top of him, but now we see that in the moments afterwards, the alternate mimicked Thatcher's voice in order to call off the surrounding police officers.
This is Lieutenant Thatcher Davis. Seems like I made a mistake. Everything's clear here at the station. Calling off all units. Over.
We then hear the alternate mock Thatcher in Thatcher's own voice. He tells Thatcher that dead or alive, he's no use to the people he's serving, and that he's just a man without a purpose. Until the alternate finally calls Thatcher a scared boy with a gun, before it switches to Mark's voice and says, "Sound familiar?" In other words, the alternate is saying that Thatcher is just a scared kid with a gun, just like Mark was right before he died. The first victim of the alternates that Thatcher couldn't save. What a brutal existence that Thatcher's living. Not only is he, effectively in hiding in what I think's like the basement of the police station, but he has to live with alternates that are just watching him at all times. And then he hears them in his own voice talk about the things he's insecure about, like the fact that he's without purpose and everyone hates him. And then it calls him a scared boy with a gun, and then is like, yeah, like that kid you got killed. Remember that? In the voice of the kid that died, because he was also a victim of the alternates, so they can use the voice and memories of the child that's dead because of Thatcher to torment Thatcher. There's all this information about alternates giving people information that's not wished to be known, or the fact that alternates can push someone to end it all just by talking to them for long enough and tormenting them with words and fears. And after seeing what they're doing to Thatcher, I believe it. We then hear a reading of a letter that Thatcher is writing to Ruth Weaver. In the letter, he says that he wishes he could talk to her, wishes that he could still watch movies with her, but he can't because she's gone, and he still feels that it's all his fault. And Thorne Baker, Thatcher's actor, does a fantastic job at portraying this. That's all we get of Thatcher for this one, but I feel that Thatcher is going to continue to adapt throughout the series, and I have a feeling he's going to become our hero.
Who is the protagonist of the Mandela Catalogue?
I would say probably Thatcher.
Yes! I knew that was the answer!
Maybe not the protagonist in a traditional sense. Like, I don't think the story will revolve around his narrative crux, although it might. I don't know where Alex is going to take it. I have a specific theory for how I think that's going to happen, but we've seen that he has a tragedy, right? Like, he started kind of on this pedestal of wanting to help people, but now he feels responsible for the death of his partner, for not being able to help Mark Heathcliff or the other people in Mandela County, and he's let it eat at him. He just sits in the darkness in this slump as literally the monsters from his past surround him constantly. And I think that he is shaping up to get a redemption through action, through overcoming his fear and through fighting now what he couldn't then. And I think he's going to become our cowboy. I have a lot of hopes for Davis. I think he's a cool character. Like I said, Thorne's a great actor, and I'm excited to see where he goes. However, for this episode, I think the much more important development that we see is that of Adam. We then see Sarah's computer screen as she's messaging Adam and asks if he's done with the memorial video for Jonah. Adam says that it's done to make a video. Sarah doesn't care, so Adam sends her what he has, and it's comedically low effort. So then Adam sends the correct file, which opens with a narration from him and a logo that says By Thorne Paranormal Society 2007 with the 2007 crossed out and 2009 written next to it. And as Adam is reading about Jonah's death, the screen says, remember to rate 5 stars and subscribe. which means Adam is the ultimate apology YouTuber. He got his friend murdered, or at least was complicit or didn't care with the fact that he got murdered. And he's like, yeah, my friend's dead. Anyway, 5 stars. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the link below to follow me over on... What a Chad. Adam also lies in the eulogy he's reading, as you could imagine, but he also gets some digs at Jonah. He says he brought a lot of positive energy to an otherwise serious organization, which is not a compliment. He also says that Jonah died peacefully, surrounded by his loved ones, when in actuality he was strangled to death by a demon on the side of the highway, which is as far removed from peaceful as you can get. During this playback, the video cuts to what seems to be altered footage. We see the inside of a house with overlaid images of Thatcher's drawings of alternates. A door opens and the camera pushes through. And as we see the in remembrance background, a picture of Evelyn pops up on the screen that says special guest, Evelyn. If it's not readily apparent, this is the alternates manipulating Adam's footage. We then hear a playback of a call from Evelyn where she says that Adam used to be a really nice guy up until he started doing the investigations with Jonah. She says that Adam was always a skeptic, which is why it was so surprising that he became a part of the Bythorn Paranormal Society and became so obsessed with these investigations. She says they got into a fight over it and that Adam told her horrible things she wished she'd never heard. It seems that after he began his investigation and obsession with alternates, that Adam changed from the person he was into something else. And that when Evelyn, or should I say Eve, looked at him, it wasn't the man she once knew. The image in the frame then cuts from a picture of Evelyn to a picture of Jonah's car on the side of the road from when Jonah died. And we hear Adam saying, supposedly over a phone call or an argument with Evelyn, that he never said that, and that it is messing with his words. He says that the computer or something else is changing what he's saying, and that he doesn't seem to be in control of what other people think they hear from him. And as he begins to say this, it begins to echo, and other versions of his same voice begin to argue over top of each other, before Adam screams over all of them and tells them to stop and shut up before saying, "Get out of my head."
It's messing with my words. I don't know what's going on. It's not me. It's a computer, I swear. I'm not stupid. I never said that. It's a computer, I swear. Messing with my words. I'm not stupid, alright? I don't know what's going on. With my words. I never said that. Shut the fuck up! I never said that. It's messing with my words. I've had enough of you! Messing with my words. I never said that. Please, get the fuck out of my head!
Clearly, there's something wrong with Adam, right? We know that when he was a child, his parents were killed by an alternate, and he came into contact with one. So there's at least trauma, if not something supernatural, that affects him from back then. But this seems to be beyond what we know. If it is metaphysical awareness disorder, which we just know at the moment to be information that's not desired to be known, then how is it pushing him to the degree that there are multiple voices within his head and that other people are hearing him say things that he didn't mean to say? And everything else to do with his personality. We assumed that his cold, uncaring nature to those around him was probably because of the alternate attack when he was a child, but to the degree that he doesn't care about his friend's life and is willing to leave him on the side of the road just for the sake of getting footage of these creatures, it seems to be more than just trauma. It seems that there's something deeply wrong with Adam, and whatever is wrong with him is about to come to the surface. We then see the introduction for a computer program called Face Studio 2. As explained to us by this very creepy program, Face Studio 2 is a computer software. It takes 3 images of a person's face and then contorts that face to say whatever you want. It seems to be some kind of early generation facial mimicking software. But as we see, it's another tool of the alternate's manipulation. For one, it not only asks for pictures of yourself, but also for your personal information, which will be stored in Face Studio 2's database. Or, in other words, the demonic hive mind. It also says that with Face Studio 2, you can customize your face, or in other words, make it morph and twist into figures that we often see with alternates. Near the end of the introduction, the program even says that it's great that digital technology has come through and saved us all, before it's cut off while saying the phrase, "Do your part in creating a better reality." See, again, as mentioned earlier, alternates would come through analog tech, so it's believed by many that digital technology will be a new way to progress society without having to, be possessed and killed by demons all the time. So the alternates are finding new ways to gather people's information, like their names and faces. And Face Studio 2 is one of these examples. As the program itself says, good thing digital tech has come through to save us all, because the alternates are pretending like digital tech is safe, so you can definitely trust it with your pictures and information. And if you needed any further confirmation that Face Studio 2 was an alternate ploy, then watch what happens immediately after. The video cuts to footage of Adam Murray's house on the night of his parents' murder, and the night he allowed an alternate, or his imaginary friend, to come into the real world. As we see this footage, the program appears and says, "A mess of tangled limbs danced around my bedroom. I held my breath and waited for it to stop. I was too scared before it begins to glitch out." The face contorts into a stretched shape before the program finally cuts out. So we saw that this was Adam Murray's household from the image of his mother and the television static. And if alternates can steal the faces, voices, and memories of their victims, then whose memories were these that the program was reciting? We then see Evelyn make her way into the Mandela County Police Department per her conversation with Dave earlier in the video. I believe this outside shot of the department further confirms my theory that the police station's abandoned and Weaver's just living in the remnants of it, because the front of the building seems to be grown up, and I believe the entire place to be derelict. This is further confirmed whenever Evelyn walks into the police station, and despite the power being on, it seems that no one's there. And also to support my theory, whenever Evelyn steps into the room, we see several recruitment posters behind her, indicating that whenever the police department did shut down, just before that, they were trying to get members to come on, because again, everyone was either dying or leaving the county. We then see a phone call between Dave Lee and Thatcher Davis. In this phone call, Dave tells Thatcher that he's done, and it's time for him to move on and quit chasing these ghosts of the past. Thatcher, who's been living in a basement for the past 17 years, as you can imagine, doesn't agree with this. Thatcher argues, saying that he needs Dave to continue these investigations, but Dave says these investigations are pointless, and Thatcher just needs to let go because he can't fix the past. It is interesting because there's not a clearly defined right or wrong opinion between either character. Because, like I mentioned, I do think Davis is going to rise to the occasion. I do think he's going to become a or the hero of the series. However, it's because he's currently in this state of misery that he will one day overcome. We can assume that where he's at right now is not a good place to be. And on the other hand, we have Dave, who allowed someone, Evelyn, to get hurt or caught up in this whole process of chasing alternates, so he decides to stop it now before anyone else becomes an unwilling victim. And while that in itself is noble, at the same time, how could you not fight the alternates? For the massive evil and tragedy they're causing the entire world, or at least Mandela and the surrounding counties, how could you not stand up against them? But at the same time, considering they're so monumental, what are fixing videotapes going to do if all it's going to do is hurt yourself and those around you? So how could you stand up against them? There's a lot of interesting thematic points happening in the series, and we'll talk about some of them at the end. But I am interested in the direction that Thatcher's character is going to adapt. And I think maybe we're seeing hints of that with characters like Dave, when he says things like, "You need to learn to accept things that you can't change." We then see Evelyn just waiting around the empty police station until Thatcher comes back, and while there, she decides to go looking through some files. In the meantime, Dave Lee goes to church to accept the job from O'Brien. Dave calls O'Brien to tell him that he's there, and O'Brien sinisterly says that he'll be right out. However, as Dave is standing outside, the sky begins to darken, and in the reflection of his glasses, we see that the false Gabriel has appeared. And for the first time in the series, the devil speaks.
You were so close, David. You had it all figured out. The
were so close, David. You had it all figured out. The stage was set for you, yet you still managed to follow the shepherd. Dave is confused and asks if this is O'Brien, but the false Gabriel says that he is a fool and it's only a matter of time before he moves on to his cop friend, or Thatcher. He even remarks that it seems that Thatcher's an easy target, which, considering how he's been living, he probably is. Dave says that he's confused and asks what the alternate meant by saying the stage was set for him, and how could he accomplish anything? And the false Gabriel replies,
"Oh, David, you have already done all of my bidding for me."
Think about what we know about alternates when it comes to technology and videos. They're able to distort and manipulate technology in order to bring themselves through into our world with things like the Intruder, or convince a child to let them manifest themselves, or just begin to enter someone's thoughts through technology itself. So with that in mind, think about what Dave and Thatcher have been doing. To them, they've been trying to put together clues and figure out what these alternates are all about. They've been gathering data from things like the toddler stress assessment video and several other clips that we've seen in the volumes of the main series. But all they've been doing is rebuilding the alternates gateway. While they think they've been smuggling technology and hiding from the law in order to fight the good fight, all that they've been doing is making sure the alternates always have a way into our world. And as was seen with Evelyn watching the toddler stress assessment video, it seems that it's still working. Which, what a heartbreaking scenario for these two. Like, Thatcher's been living in hiding for the past 17 years, doing everything he can to fight the alternates while living in constant fear, only for it to be revealed that all he was doing was making them stronger. And Dave, rebuilding these videotapes and what he thinks is putting together evidence, is actually just making sure that these pathways are still alive. It's because of this revelation that in the following moments, Dave drops to his knees and clutches his face, realizing that a lot of the terror that's still happening in the Mandela County is because of him. This also answers the question of Thatcher Davis. Why, whenever the alternate came up to him and attacked him and began to mimic him, did it not just kill him? And why is there an alternate in his closet watching him every night that doesn't just kill him then? It's because they don't need to. If anything, they need to keep him alive because Thatcher is working for them even if he doesn't know it. But now Dave was ready to quit, and he called Thatcher and said he's not making any more tapes, which means now they're no longer useful. So after Dave's realization of what he's done, the false Gabriel kills Dave. Now, we had some other mentions in that conversation about things like the shepherd, and we'll talk about that at the end. After this, we cut back to Evelyn going through the police records. Under the file labeled Murray, she finds the divorce agreement of Adam's parents as seen in Volume 3. And underneath the divorce agreement, she finds the toddler stress assessment review, and that the assessment was performed on a young Adam Murray. See, all the way back in Volume 1 of the Mandela Catalogue, we saw a video called Toddler Stress Assessment. The purpose of this video was to test a toddler's responses to certain stimuli, both visual and audible. However, while back then we just thought this was another creepy way to show how alternates can react with our reality, now it's showing us that that video was what Adam saw as a child. We see that Adam was tested on September the 14th of 1992, 1 week before Mark Heathcliff's death. More importantly, we see that Adam scored 0 across the board. In other words, he reacted to nothing that a child should normally react to. This is undoubtedly because of the things he saw and heard from the alternates night after night on his parents' TV. The message in the review says, "Dear Lynn and Jude, your son Adam did not react to any audio or visual stimuli during the assessment. This may be a result of A, lack of basic intellectual capabilities compared to other children his age, or B, the result of the recent phenomenon occurring with children his age." Because remember, whenever the alternates did attack, it affected thousands of children, and thousands went missing. We see cuts of the words on paper interlaced with cuts of Evelyn's eye worriedly reading through them. And as she's reading this, someone turns off power to the police department. Evelyn is confused and thinks that it might be Thatcher, so she goes out to the hallway to look for him. As she peeks down the hallway, she sees something move around the corner. And then when we cut back to Evelyn, we see a hand reaching for her from behind the door. The only way I could see her being alive is if that was a fake out there at the end. But if we just see Evelyn in Volume 5 and she's like, "Hi friends, it's very good to see you," kill it. Shoot it. That is not Evelyn. Burn it right now. We then cut back to the conversation between Adam and Sarah, only this time from Adam's point of view. Before Adam can respond to Sarah, he gets a message from a spam account that says they've been trying to reach Adam Murray. As Adam begins to reply, the stranger's profile picture becomes an image of the intruder. The screen tears away as we're taken into a video of the intruder speaking to Adam. For one, the effects of this scene are perfect. The intruders are an amalgamation of people's faces, and to see this broken clay model with an eye periodically rolling forward and then back into its skull, as its mouth and facial expressions don't quite match as it tries to mimic what it thinks humanity is. It's perfect. And it's here that we get the most important dialogue in the entire series to date. The alternate begins by telling Adam that when he was a young boy, the television would comfort him. And more specifically, the alternates acting through the television became his friends.
Drowning out the darkness with his favorite programs. Do you remember how we became friends? The light scared off all monsters. It kept him safe. Do you remember my face?
The intruder asks Adam, "Do you remember my face?" And we see a quick flash of Stanley, the face that made Adam think of an imaginary friend that came to life and killed his parents. He then says, "Through contorted flesh and broken bones, I made myself known," as we see a quick flash of the face on the television from Intruder Alert. This line about contorted flesh and broken bones is the same line we heard during the Face Studio 2 segment from the program as it was speaking over the footage of Adam's room. The intruder says, "Do you remember my touch? I cradled him in my arms, my sweet boy. I took him away. Do you remember that night, Murray?"
Do you remember my touch? I cradled him in my arms, my sweet boy. I took him away. Do you remember that night, Murray?
Now, of course, the intruder's talking about Adam. Everything up until this point has been about the night the intruder came into Adam's house and made himself physical and killed Adam's parents. But what's this part about the intruder carrying him away? We've understood up until this point that Adam manifested the intruder into our plane of existence, and that his parents were killed, and that he probably had some physical interaction with them because that's what gave him metaphysical awareness disorder. But other than the brief mention in Intruder Alert that, distraught at the sight of her missing infant, that the child was gone for a brief period of time, we always just kind of assumed that Adam was still there, or he was at least gone for a little while before being returned. So what's the intruder mean that he carried the boy away? The intruder continues and says, "When you stare into your mirror, you see the same monsters from your bedroom, don't you?" And we see a quick flash of the face seen in the house in Volume 2. He then says, "Your skin is not your own," before he gives us the 5 most important words in the Mandela Catalogue: "You're not the real you." Every time that Adam looks into the mirror, he sees the same monster that was in his room that night. But not because he's tormented by the memories of it, he's tormented by the presence of it. We thought that all those years back in 1992 that all the children who disappeared were taken away from some time before being delivered back to their families, and that whatever these children saw surely traumatized them, and that must be what metaphysical awareness disorder is. However, it seems those children who were taken away never came back, and instead, an alternate was put in their place, which means Adam Murray is an alternate. He just doesn't know it yet. Or at the very least, he's having trouble remembering. See, we never knew what the alternates' plan was, but now it seems we do. They kidnap thousands of children and replace them with themselves, to grow up and one day influence and take over humanity subtly from within. While I'm sure they have the resources and strength to physically fight whoever they want, it seems that they're more interested in influence and control from within. And it seems that Adam was one of those victims. The real Adam Murray is most likely dead, killed by the alternates whenever he was dragged away from his house in 1992, or perhaps being held somewhere by them for some unknown reason, but most likely dead or close to it. The Adam that we know is one of these alternates set to take a child's place. So while we've seen all of these details of Adam, all of this cold, callous nature he has to friends, and this hyperfixation he has on alternates, it's not a human who's lost touch with humanity, it is a demon who's trying to gain touch to humanity. And it seems that Adam is a sort of sleeper cell, as he doesn't even know that he's an alternate. He hears these other voices in his head that he can't explain, and other people say that he said things to them that he didn't mean to say. While he's aware that there's something wrong with him, to some degree, he didn't know the extent of it. He didn't know that he was never human to begin with. But if you'll remember, alternates are mimics of the face, voice, and memories of the people they steal. So that means this young demon who we call Adam was embedded with the memories of this infant and his family. And as he's grown up, he's tried to accept pieces of humanity. He's tried to have relationships. He's tried to build friendships. And while he's not good at it from what we've seen, it's incredible that he's even trying.
I
did the right thing.
Perhaps none of the alternates in hiding know that they're alternates. Maybe they all just think they're people who have some weird disconnect from humanity around them, only to one day be activated for whatever the false Gabriel wants. Or maybe, like I said earlier, Adam's special. Maybe he's different. Maybe he has, for some reason, tried to fall back in with humanity despite his nature being the complete opposite of it. Back in Volume 2, whenever Adam encountered the alternate in the house, the alternate said that he is a fool for following the shepherd. Again, we'll talk about the shepherd in a minute. But the alternate says to follow my voice instead, and says, "Wake up, Adam, don't make me wake the others." See, at the time, we figured that he was telling Adam to just give in to the alternates, and when he said wake the others, that he was talking about waking other alternates like the alternate itself that was confronting Adam. But what he was actually saying is Adam is an alternate who has forgot his purpose, and if he doesn't wake up, he is going to wake up all these other alternates who have either forgotten their purpose or have just been dormant as a sleeper cell. It adds levels of complexity and intrigue to the series that blow my mind. And it's also been incredibly well hinted in the background, but up until now, we didn't see them as hints. But looking back now, they're so obviously hints. Like, for example, look at this character design of the alternate that the Intruder says Adam sees every time he looks in the mirror, and the same thing that he saw in the house back in Volume 2, and now look at a picture of Adam. It's very clear that the alternate is just a distorted version of Adam himself. And again, going all the way back to Volume 1, if you remember the think principle from the Department of Temporal Phenomena, remember that K stood for know your place in reality. And while this is applicable for people who are facing doppelgangers, think about people who are experiencing metaphysical awareness disorder. The thing that we just thought meant that you were traumatized from experiencing an alternate attack. When, as we see with Adam, it means you are an alternate. In other words, it seems that Adam forgot to know his place in reality. So that is by far the biggest bombshell we've had in the series. You're not the real you. Everything that we know about how the alternates work, to what Adam, arguably our main character of the series, is going through, is because he is not a human fighting the alternates. He is an alternate who is being both tethered to what he wants to be or what he thinks he should be with humanity and his true calling as an alternate. But despite having this inert desire he can't explain and doesn't make sense for himself to be so invested and obsessed with these alternates, he still somehow pushes back against them because he's continuing to follow the shepherd, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he still pushing back despite being so drawn. And with humanity, he is pushing back despite being so drawn. And with those 5 words, he became one of the most interesting characters that I have ever seen in internet fiction. And we'll talk about my theory around him in a moment, but for now, let's finish out Volume 4. We hear in a voicemail from Sarah that despite her anger, she still cares about Adam and wants to make sure that he's okay. Again, we have a physical drawing of his alternate nature and his human nature pulling in both directions. Finally, we see a gray sky as bright red letters appear, the same red letters that denoted the speaking of the false Gabriel in the first video of the entire series, Overthrown. The message says, "I deceived him, the Mandela Prophet. We have their prayers and their records." It begins today. The Mandela Prophet might be Adam, but I'm not sure about that yet. I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing that the false Gabriel just said, "We have their prayers and their records," is again denoting the fact that the alternates have taken over all of religion. So anyone who prays to what they think is God is giving their faith to these creatures. And as shown with Face Studio 2, people are physically giving over their bodies and information to these creatures. So it seems that with the public giving their spirit and form, the alternates are ready to attack. We then see 3 images of Adam Murray in the same style that Face Studio 2 recommended earlier to give your information to the program, confirming for us that Adam is a part of the alternates game. And with that, we have the end of the Mandela Catalogue Volume 4. So that was a lot, especially there at the end. So let's try to break some of it down. Whenever the false Gabriel says, "I deceived him, the Mandela Prophet," I am pretty sure that is referring to Adam, because it seems that Adam is their front runner, or at least their first pick, to lead whatever kind of attack or underground uprising the alternates plan to have. The reason I say this is because back in Volume 2, whenever Adam was at that house, the alternate was trying to convince him to wake up before saying, "Don't make me wake the others." So why wouldn't the alternate just wake the others? I believe for some reason they want Adam specifically. Maybe he's the one best positioned in the Bythorn Paranormal Society, or maybe once again, Adam's just special. So it's for that reason I believe he is the Mandela Prophet, the one that the alternates want to pave the way for whatever this attack is. I also think that's what it meant whenever the final message said it begins today, because the last thing we saw today was the Intruder finally confirming for Adam that he's not human, he's not the real him. So now that Adam knows that, they can move forward with the next phase of their plan. So now that begs the question, is Adam going to go through with this plan? He certainly might. If he's been an alternate for all this time, and the other alternates are just now activating him, then there's no telling what he might do. He might immediately flip and begin to help them spread their influence across the world, or at least Mandela County. And if that is the direction the series has gone, then Alex has done a fantastic job at making a great antagonist, or at least a supporting antagonist alongside the false Gabriel. But as we've seen, Adam is a lot more complicated than just a sleeper agent. And to explain my personal theory on Adam moving forward, let's talk about Interlude. So remember how in Interlude it was showing us the different levels of assimilation an alternate can have, and it showed us the overdriven assimilation? Well, a lot of you might have recognized that the overdriven alternate we see next to the Nun is the same alternate that is shown as Adam's mirror reflection, or Adam's true form. So how does that make any sense? How can the Nun be this alternate but also be Adam? Well, I, as mentioned, have a pretty good source, that source being Alex Kister himself. So in my attempt to be sly, I messaged him and was like, hey, just, theoretically as a joke in Minecraft, would it be possible for an alternate to assimilate someone and then be placed in someone else's shoes? And Alex said yes. So it is my theory, and I believe this will be revealed in the next coming episodes, that an alternate came into this world the normal way, the way we saw from the first volumes of the series, by either convincing someone to end it, or by physically attacking them and assimilating, as we saw with Thatcher, One way or the other, this nun was killed and an alternate stepped into their place in reality, but the assimilation didn't work quite right. As we saw, it was overdriven. So then, years later, whenever it came time to begin this phase of the plan where they kidnap all these children and replace them with alternates, because I don't imagine these demons age or need to be the physical form of a child or what have you. Whenever that time came, this alternate is simply the one who stepped into the place of Adam Murray and gathered his face, thoughts, and memories. And that's really interesting because as Adam grows up, he begins to physically take on attributes of his true alternate form. It's not that the alternate in the mirror looks like Adam, it's that Adam looks like the alternate of the nun. But when I say that Adam's a complicated character, that's exactly what I'm talking about. See, whenever we saw that nun, we saw that it was a messenger. We'll talk about a messenger for what in just a second, but we see that this nun is somehow important in Interlude. So then an alternate takes that nun's place, and from what we know, probably brings on the memories and thoughts of that person. So what is a demon that has the memories and thoughts of a nun, of the complete opposite of a demonic entity? So that alternate lives for a while and then gets placed in the role of a child who has, again, very non-demonic thoughts and ideas, and then begins to grow up in a community of friends and people who care about him, people like Sarah and Evelyn who want to make sure that he's doing okay. What is a demon who's been so ripped apart with the ideas of humanity that he doesn't remember he's a demon anymore? I mean, we clearly see that parts of the young Adam's memory were maintained. The audio about a dangling man around his bed that is mentioned by both the program in Face Studio 2 and the Intruder are both memories of the young Adam Murray. So the alternate collective, at least, still remembers the human that was Adam. So I'm sure the alternate Adam remembers the human that might have been Adam. And between that and the memories and ideas of a nun and whatever else is mixed around in the alternate brain that is Adam, I'm sure he's got a lot going on. I mean, as we saw from that whole phone call recording that Evelyn had in the Corrupted Memorial video, we hear that Adam thinks these other voices in his head can't be controlled and they just come out of nowhere. All of these competing ideas and concepts he doesn't even know about. He didn't even know he was an alternate up until now. So now that he does know, what's that going to change? Will he pick one side or the other? Will he maintain this kind of straightforward approach, not picking either? Will he make his own path? I don't know. I'm so excited to see where Adam's character goes from here. And then for my last theory, I want to talk about what I think is going to be the most crucial and coolest factor of the Mandela Catalogue moving forward, the Shepherd. The Shepherd is a concept that has been teased at a lot, but we still don't know a ton about. The first time we hear it definitively mentioned is in Volume 2, whenever the alternate says, "You followed the Shepherd, you are a fool," to Adam. Now, from what we know now, Adam is an alternate, and he seemingly hasn't been following anyone other than his desire to go on these alternate investigations. So what does this alternate mean whenever he says that Adam's been following the Shepherd? And furthermore, in Volume 4, the Shepherd gets mentioned again whenever the false Gabriel is talking to Dave and says that despite everything being laid out for him, Dave followed the Shepherd. Now that also doesn't make sense for the Shepherd to be a lone individual because, for one, Adam and the combination of Dave and Thatcher, which is what the false Gabriel mentions. He says that Thatcher and Dave have not followed the Shepherd, or he mentions them in a connotation that it's not implied they're on the same level as the Shepherd, or whatever. Dave and Thatcher are not the Shepherd, and Adam's not the Shepherd, but how could they both be following them when it doesn't look like there'd be any overlap for them to follow a single individual? And whatever this Shepherd is, it is in clear opposition to the alternates. My theory is that the Shepherd is God, or at least some aspect of God, if that's an angel or a religious leader or something similar. Not a religious leader in the sense that we've seen so far, that churches and religion itself all goes towards serving the alternates. I mean an actual, true, original God before overthrown religious leader. Think about it. If the alternates are demons, if they are effectively just the Legion of Hell, which I think we've pretty well established they are, then to turn against them and try to find out information about them or destroy them would be to go against hell, which naturally means you're allying yourself with the army of heaven. And while we saw in Overthrown that they were overthrown, and there's a mention of the white text in the sky that figures of the Bible have been committed to a sort of solitude, that doesn't mean they're dead, especially not in the modern sense. If they were chained up or locked away for some long period of time, what's to say they're not active now? And as this plan of the alternates is going into effect, I think we're going to see whatever the shepherd is. We're already getting hints about it. Whenever we see the overdriven assimilation in Interlude and it shows the nun, it refers to her as a messenger. Not the messenger, not that she's some standalone, religious figure that everyone looked to, but that she is a messenger. And a messenger of what? I think the shepherd. My prediction is that in the next few episodes of the Mandela Catalogue, we are going to see either God, an angel, or some powerful force stand in opposition to the alternates. I think that presence might be the reason that the alternates haven't outright just began massacring and taking over groups of people, because they still fear the return of the shepherd. And I think at the very least, even if it's not directly God or an angel or some other heavenly being, I think we are going to see a supernatural entity that calls itself the shepherd stand in physical defiance of the alternates. And I, for one, cannot wait for that to happen, and I am pumped. Between all the elements that Alex has thrown together, from the character building of individuals like Thatcher Davis and the supporting cast of Evelyn and Sarah, and then to see Adam being touted as such a complicated and multi-layered creature, effectively, that is both human and demon in equal parts, and to see or wonder where he's going to go in the future, and then these implications of a greater world and a greater war happening beyond us, and to imagine that all of these horrible things, the Intruder, the false Gabriel, that all of them that's caused so much fear and misery are still fighting something known as the shepherd, something we don't even know what it is yet. It's so good, and it's such a great time to be a part of this series. And as someone who really began his channel, or at least began the early days of his channel, off the Mandela Catalogue, and to get to know Alex and to see him grow as a creator and to see all of this happen, it is incredible. I am so pumped. I'm so pumped to see where it goes from now. I'm so pumped for him to make future videos about it and destroy my theories, which will be fine, because I'm sure whatever he has in mind is better than whatever I have in mind. And I just, man, it's so cool to watch this happen. As you can tell, I'm into it. I'm obviously a nerd for it, but really, to Alex and the cast and the editors and the artist and everyone who's putting this together, thank you. It really means a lot to get to watch this series happen and get to be a small part of it, analyzing and talking about it to people at large. And again, to Alex and everyone else who gives me the time of day, thank you so much. It's really cool. The Mandela Catalogue is so fascinating to me because out of all of the analog / digital / YouTube horror series, it's the only one that really strikes me as being completely and fully about the characters. The writing for it sets it apart from everything else in its category, and I believe is one of the main reasons that the series has the dominance it currently does. Sure, the scary visuals definitely hook you on first viewing and are one of the highlights of the series, but when I think of the Mandela Catalogue, I think of characters like Adam and Thatcher. And it's for that reason I can't wait to see where the series goes from here. Because it's one thing to be scared in an internet horror series, but it's entirely different to care about it. And I truly care about the Mandela Catalogue. I think Alex Kister has done a fantastic job at crafting the world and characters that he has, and hopefully you do too. But regardless if you care about the Mandela Catalogue or not, even though you should, you've made it this far, and I just want to say thank you for watching. The Mandela Catalogue is a fantastic series, and please, if you've watched this video, I'm begging you, go to Alex Kister's channel, the link will be in the description, subscribe, leave him some likes, some comments, he certainly deserves it. It's amazing to see where the series went from just being made on his iPhone that became this kind of cultural, moment that everyone on the internet, or at least on the horror side of the internet, flocked to now a series with characters who are talked about, theorized, discussed. It's really something special to see, and I'm certainly happy to be a small part of that. I'll be covering more episodes of the Mandela Catalogue as they come out, but please, if you support me, which I greatly appreciate, show Alex some love as well. My interviews with Alex Kister and reactions to new Mandela Catalogue episodes are over on my second channel, Winda Gang, so head over there if you're interested. Link will be in the description. Thank you all so much for watching and sticking around this far. Like I said, this is not my Halloween video. This is just a sort of appetizer for the Halloween season. I'm really excited with my plans for the Halloween video. That will not be out by Halloween. The Kaczynski video will kind of be my Halloween video in a weird way, which I guess makes sense. But what I have planned for my Halloween video, I'm very excited for, and hopefully you are too when you see it. So we'll see how all of that goes. But for now, I'm working on one project at a time. Hopefully you guys understand that when the final projects come out, that they'll be worth the wait, or at least I hope they'll be worth the wait, but we'll have to see. I guess you guys will be able to tell better than I can what the quality is, right? But I'm working on more stuff. Hopefully this holds you over until then. My wedding was incredible, and thank you guys for the opportunity for it. It really does mean the world. I understand that the reason I'm able to take off the amounts of time that I am and have the luxuries I'm able to treat myself and treat my wife to is because you guys watch my videos and show so much support with things like merch and just watching my videos, just viewing, commenting, liking, all that is the reason that I'm able to have the luxuries that I have. And I don't take that for granted. So thank you guys for the life you've given me. I can never say thank you enough, but sincerely, thank you. I believe that should do it for now. More projects, more videos on the way. Again, one last time, if you want this shirt or this hoodie, you've got 2.5 days left. So go to the description, get them while you can. But I believe that should do it for now. New videos on the way. But until then, I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.